Imagine living each day with a calm mind, clear thoughts, and a strong heart, no matter what happens around you. Imagine waking up and knowing that no matter what stress, noise, or pressure comes your way, are in control. You are steady. You are unshakable. You. But tell me the truth. How many times have you felt the opposite? How many days have started with anxiety, frustration, or that heavy feeling that life is just too much? How many times have you reacted without thinking, lost your patience, or felt like life was happening to you, not for you? The way you think shapes the way you live. And when your mind is full of worry or chaos, your whole life feels out of balance. But when your thoughts are strong, calm, and focused, your life starts to change. Your decisions become better. Your relationships get easier. You stop wasting time on things you can't control. Today, you're going to discover the philosophy that can help you do exactly that. Stoic philosophy. And don't worry, it's not about big, confusing words or ancient books. It's about real-life tools you can use every day to become more peaceful, more powerful, and more free. These aren't just ideas. They are life principles that have helped people for thousands of years. From Roman emperors to everyday people like you and me. So get ready, because after this video, you'll look at life differently. You'll stop being controlled by your emotions and start guiding them with reason. You'll learn how to protect your peace, no matter what happens outside of you. This is more than just watching a video. This is training your mind to stay calm in chaos, to stay strong in discomfort, to stay focused in a noisy world. So sit down, take a breath, and write this down. I am not here to control the world. I am here to control myself. Repeat it. Feel it. Believe it. Because the more you remind your mind of this truth, the stronger it becomes. The calmer you live, and the better your life gets. One choice, one thought, one breath at a time. Now let's begin. Some days feel like they pass without meaning. You wake up, do what needs to be done, check the messages, go to work, go home, and by the time your head hits the pillow, you wonder where the time went. You lived the whole day, but you don't remember being in it. It's like you existed without living. Now, think about this. What if one day a week could bring everything back into focus? What if one day could help you make sense of all the others? The Stoics believed in something powerful, setting aside regular time to pause, reflect, and reconnect with what truly matters. This wasn't about escape. It wasn't about running from life's stress. It was about facing it better, stronger, with more clarity. They didn't call it a sabbath, but their practice held the same soul. Seneca wrote letters not just to give advice, but to help others, and himself, step back from the rush of life and see things as they really are. This was not laziness. It was discipline of the highest kind, the discipline to slow down with purpose, to think, feel, learn, and grow without distraction. And in our modern world, that might be the greatest strength of all. Seneca often said that people are frugal with their money, but wasteful with their time. They guard their wallets, but give away their hours like loose change. The Stoic Sabbath is the antidote to that waste. It's the practice of claiming back your mind, not in dramatic moments, but in still, consistent ones. And it starts by making one day sacred, not in a religious way, but in a personal, philosophical way. This day is not for errands, not for catching up on tasks, not for working ahead. It's for reviewing who you are, how you've been living, and where you're going. It's about realigning your actions with your values instead of drifting through another week that looks like the one before. The Stoic Sabbath begins with silence. No phone, no inbox, No need to perform. Instead, it's about returning to yourself. Sit down with a notebook. Let your thoughts come out raw. Write about what you said that week, what you did, what made you angry, what made you proud, and what you could have done better. This is not about being perfect. It's about being honest. Most people don't do this because silence can feel uncomfortable. When you stop moving, you start to hear your own thoughts, and not all of them are easy to listen to. But this is exactly where growth begins. You can't change what you won't look at, and 1 hour of deep reflection can do more for your progress than 100 hours of mindless action. On this day, you also train your attention. You ask questions that go deeper than just, "What did I get done?" Instead, ask, "What kind of person was I this week? Did I act with courage or fear? Did I speak the truth or stay quiet to be liked? Did I use my time wisely or let it slip away?" These questions hurt sometimes, but they sharpen the soul. They guide you back to what matters. Marcus Aurelius did this daily in his meditations. He wasn't writing to impress anyone. He wasn't posting for followers. He was holding himself accountable, checking the quality of his thoughts, making sure he wasn't becoming someone he wouldn't respect. You can do the same. You don't need fancy words or long hours. What matters is the intention. 1 hour a week where your only goal is to be real with yourself. That's how change starts. That's how clarity grows. You can also use this day to read, not for entertainment, but for insight. Read one passage from Seneca, Epictetus, or Marcus. Then sit with it. Let it echo in your mind. Ask what it means for your life. For example, Seneca said, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." That might sound poetic, but think deeper. Are you spreading yourself too thin, saying yes to everything and giving your best to nothing? That one line could change how you approach your time, your goals, even your relationships. But don't stop at reading. Reflect on what you've absorbed. What stuck with you? What felt uncomfortable? What truth are you avoiding because it's easier to stay distracted? The Stoic Sabbath is about bringing light into the corners of your mind that you usually ignore. And while others use their weekend to escape from life, you use yours to go deeper into it. That's not weakness, that's mastery. This practice also resets your emotional compass. If something has been bothering you all week, something someone said, a mistake you made, a decision that feels off, write it out, break it down. Ask, is this within my control? If yes, take responsibility. If not, release it. That simple filter alone can bring you back to peace. Over time, this one day changes your relationship with every other day. You start to notice things more. You respond instead of react. You say no with more confidence. You move slower, but with more power. Why? Because you've trained your mind to come back to stillness. Some people try to find that stillness by leaving everything behind, going on long trips, quitting jobs, changing relationships. But the Stoics knew that you don't need to change your location to find peace. You need to change how you see. And the best way to change your sight is to regularly clean your lens. That's what this day is for. You'll also begin to notice patterns. When you reflect weekly, you start to see which habits are hurting you. Maybe you scroll too much at night and feel drained in the morning. Maybe you keep avoiding hard conversations and feel tension in your body. Maybe you say yes to things that don't align with your goals. These small things, when left unchecked, become the reasons people feel stuck. But when you notice them, you can change them, slowly, with patience, without judgment. The Stoic Sabbath is not about punishment, it's about awareness. From awareness comes choice, and from choice, freedom. This practice also helps with decision-making. If you've been unsure about something, a project, a relationship, a habit, you now have space to step back. Ask, what would the wiser version of me do? Am I acting from fear or from principle? Will this matter to me in 5 years? These questions don't give perfect answers, but they help you ask better questions. And often, better questions lead to better lives. Think of this day as a check-in with your future self. Are you becoming the kind of person you'll be proud of later? Or are you drifting into someone you won't even recognize? It also deepens your sense of gratitude. When life moves fast, it's easy to focus on what's missing. But when you pause, you notice the small wins, the quiet moments, the kindness you showed, the strength you used when no one saw. Gratitude in this context isn't about pretending life is perfect. It's about seeing clearly that even in imperfection, there's beauty. Some people say, I don't have time for reflection. But the truth is, without reflection, you waste time on the wrong things. You make the same mistakes. You chase things that don't matter. You let life pass by without direction. Taking 1 hour to pause saves you hundreds of hours of confusion. It also makes you more resilient. Because when life throws something hard at you, and it will, you'll have a stronger mind. A mind that's practiced in patience, in perspective, in letting go of what you can't control. This strength doesn't appear by magic. It's built through quiet, consistent reflection. You don't need to wait for a crisis to become wise. You don't need to lose everything to wake up. You just need to make space every week, to slow down, to think, to feel, to align. Over time, this weekly ritual becomes something you look forward to. Not because it's easy, but because it's real. It's where you face yourself without filters, where you remember what matters, where you reset your direction. This kind of day also strengthens your relationships. When you understand yourself better, you communicate with more clarity. You stop expecting others to give you what you haven't given yourself. You stop blaming and start leading. That shift can change how you show up as a partner, a parent, a friend. It also sharpens your focus. When you know your values, you stop chasing every new trend. You stop comparing. You stop being pulled in 100 directions. You focus on what truly moves the needle for you. That level of alignment is rare, but it's possible. The Stoic Sabbath doesn't require candles or ceremonies. It just requires presence, a journal, a quiet space, and the courage to meet your own mind. There's a kind of peace that comes when you no longer avoid yourself. When you face your doubts, your fears, your mistakes, and still say, I'm growing, I'm learning, I'm showing up. That peace isn't loud, but it's powerful. And it starts with a simple habit. 1 day a week, to return to your values, to learn from your week, to prepare your mind for the next one. That's how you live on purpose, not once in a while, but every day, with the strength that comes from stopping, reflecting, and choosing with intention. So the question now isn't, do I have time for this? The real question is, how much longer will I keep living without it? But what happens when you begin to live with purpose, when your inner life becomes stronger than your outer noise? There comes a moment when you notice a quiet shift. You no longer feel the need to constantly explain yourself. You no longer chase approval with every move. And yet, something strange appears. A world where appearances often matter more than truth. Where people try to look good instead of being good. This next part isn't comfortable, but it's necessary. There's a difference between living with integrity and performing it for applause. One is invisible but powerful. The other is loud but empty. And today, more than ever, we live in a time where the performance of virtue is everywhere. Social media, public statements, carefully crafted messages, all done not to live rightly, but to appear right. Stoicism cuts through that noise with a blade of silence. The Stoics weren't interested in showing off their values. They were interested in living them, not for others, but for themselves. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." It sounds simple, but it's everything. Virtue, in the Stoic sense, is not decoration. It's not branding. It's not a polished image. It's a quiet fire that guides your choices when no one is watching. Courage, justice, temperance, wisdom. These are not buzzwords to post online. They're muscles built in the gym of daily life. When you live with true virtue, you don't have to tell people who you are. Your actions speak first. You listen when it's hard. You tell the truth when it costs you. You do what's right when there's nothing to gain. That's not glamorous. That's not viral, but it's real. Virtue signaling, on the other hand, is the opposite. It's loud. It needs witnesses. It thrives on being seen. A person says the right thing publicly, but treats people poorly in private. They post about kindness, but snap at the waiter. They demand justice online, but avoid personal accountability. It's not about growth, it's about image. The Stoics had a word for this: hypocrisy, and they warned against it like a disease of the soul. Seneca, in particular, called out those who dressed the part of a philosopher but lived with no discipline. He didn't care if someone quoted Plato. He cared if they lived with restraint when no one was looking. That was the test. Living virtuously means doing the hard work inside, where nobody claps. It means noticing when you fall short and correcting it, not justifying it. It means practicing humility, even when you're right, especially when you're right. Because real virtue doesn't need to win, it needs to stay grounded. One of the biggest challenges in our world today is that people confuse visibility with value. If something is seen, it must be good. If it's not seen, it must not matter. But Stoicism flips that upside down. It teaches that the most valuable things are often invisible: your intentions, your discipline, your forgiveness, your restraint. If someone helps a stranger and never tells anyone, that's real. If someone does it with a camera rolling, we have to ask, who was that really for? Now, this isn't to say that public action is always fake. Of course not. But Stoicism teaches us to look inward first, to examine our motives, to ask, am I doing this because it's right, or because I want to be seen doing what's right? That one question can transform the way you move through the world. The Stoics also knew that the craving for approval is one of the greatest traps of the human mind. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." That's hard. That's brutally hard. Because who wants to look foolish when you're trying to live well? But that's the point. Virtue means you don't chase the crowd. You don't bend your values just to be accepted. You stand where it's right, even if you stand alone. Living virtuously also means letting go of the need to correct others all the time. You focus on your own alignment. That doesn't mean you ignore injustice or stay silent about harm, but it means you lead with example, not ego. You show the way through your own discipline, not through shaming, not through outrage. You also understand that real virtue is built over time. It's not a label you earn once and keep forever. It's a choice you make again and again, especially when it's hard. Anyone can be kind when they're in a good mood, but can you be kind when you're angry? Can you be just when it costs you something? Can you be calm when you're under pressure? That's where virtue is forged, and that's what makes it powerful. Because once it's real in you, no one can take it. People can misunderstand you. They can judge you. They can mock you. But if your soul is aligned, their opinions lose power. You don't need to prove anything. You just keep showing up with quiet strength. There's another reason Stoics valued silent virtue. It protects the soul from pride. When you constantly seek to be seen as good, you risk building your identity on the approval of others. And once that approval goes away, what happens to your worth? Stoicism helps you build a self that stands on its own, rooted in values, not applause. That doesn't mean you don't care about others. On the contrary, you care more deeply, because your care isn't performative. It's not calculated. It's not for show. It's for service. When you live this way, something else happens. You become a mirror. Your quiet consistency makes others reflect on themselves, not because you lecture them, but because they feel your peace, your presence, your clarity. You don't have to convince. You become the evidence. This kind of life won't get you trending, but it will give you strength. It will give you sleep. It will give you the deep kind of confidence that doesn't need likes to feel whole. Seneca wrote that the wise man is sufficient unto himself. That doesn't mean isolation. It means you are your own compass, your own approval, your own audience. And from that place, everything you give to others is clean. It's not polluted with ego. It's real. Virtue signaling is often loud because it's hollow. It tries to fill a void with attention. But real virtue is quiet because it's full. It needs nothing. So how do you move from signaling to substance? Start by observing yourself, not with shame, but with honesty. When you do good, can you let it stay private? When you speak, can you check your motive? When you act, can you do it without needing to be seen? Also, remove the scoreboard. Don't keep track of your good deeds. Don't compare your values to others. You're not competing, you're cultivating. Your goal is alignment, not applause. This also means allowing space for imperfection. You will fall short. You will act from ego. You will have moments where your words outpace your actions. That's human. But what matters is that you see it, that you return, that you keep growing toward better, not louder. And here's something else the Stoics knew. Real virtue often feels boring. It's not flashy. It's not dramatic. It's patient. It's restrained. It's consistent. And because it doesn't come with external rewards, it's easy to overlook. But over time, it builds something no audience can give you: inner peace. That's the hidden treasure of quiet virtue. You live with yourself differently. You become trustworthy in your own eyes. That trust creates calm. That calm creates focus. And that focus creates a life that's not built on sand. So while the world celebrates appearance, you celebrate alignment. While others compete to appear righteous, you return to your soul and ask, am I living in truth? Am I guided by virtue, even when no one's watching? And maybe most important of all, you learn to celebrate in silence, to let your victories be private, to let your goodness speak softly. Because in the end, the goal is not to be admired. The goal is to be free. Free from the need to be seen. Free from the trap of pretending. Free to live a life that feels right, even if it's invisible. That is the reward of virtue, and it can never be taken away. There's a moment, after you stop needing to be seen as good, when a deeper test appears, not in your words, but in your heart, not in your image, but in what you carry quietly. That test is called Resentment. You've likely been hurt, betrayed, disrespected. Someone crossed a line or failed you when you needed them most. And even if time has passed, something remains. A tightness, a tension, a silent sentence you keep replaying in your mind. This is where the next challenge begins, not to look virtuous, but to become truly free. Forgiveness for the Stoics was never about pretending nothing happened. It wasn't about letting people off the hook. It wasn't soft. It was strong. Stoic forgiveness is not approval of harm. It's the refusal to let pain control your life. It's the decision to see clearly, act wisely, and release what poisons your peace. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, but pain caused by others often lives in both. We replay words, arguments, moments where we felt powerless, and the mind, when it holds on, keeps cutting itself open again and again. The Stoics taught us to observe these wounds, not to suppress them, but to understand them, to rise above their grip. To forgive in the Stoic sense means to choose clarity over chaos. It's to say, yes, this hurt, but I will not let it harden me. It's strength without armor. It's choosing not to become what wounded you. One of the hardest things about forgiving is the fear that you're letting someone get away with it. But the Stoic doesn't forgive to excuse. They forgive to release themselves from the burden of carrying someone else's behavior. It's not about justice through punishment. It's about reclaiming your freedom from the emotional debt left by others. Epictetus reminds us that it's not the event itself that disturbs us, but our opinion about it. Forgiveness requires challenging the story you've told yourself over and over again. You don't erase the facts. You remove the poison. You look at the hurt and say, "This happened. It was wrong, but I will not let it live in me anymore." That choice requires moral clarity. It means seeing clearly who is responsible for what, and refusing to take on what isn't yours. If someone harmed you, that's their failure. But if you cling to hate, that becomes yours. Stoicism doesn't push you to forget. It invites you to separate the truth from the noise, to see things as they are, not more, not less. You can forgive and still hold boundaries. You can forgive and still seek justice. You can forgive and still decide that trust has been broken. Forgiveness doesn't mean going back. It means moving forward without the weight. A Stoic understands that holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and hoping someone else feels it. It wastes your energy. It clouds your judgment. It keeps you locked in a moment that no longer exists. The past cannot be changed, but your relationship to it can. There is courage in that, the courage to face the full picture without turning bitter, the courage to say, "This will not shape the rest of my life." The Stoics call this inner freedom, the ability to choose your response regardless of circumstance. That includes when you've been wronged. But how do you actually do it? It starts with truth. Naming the harm without exaggeration. Seeing what was done without adding extra stories. You were hurt, yes, but you were not destroyed. You were wounded, but you're not broken. That subtle shift matters. It gives you back your strength. Then you shift your focus from the person to the pattern. What did this experience teach you about your values, your boundaries, your assumptions? The Stoics turned every hardship into training, not for revenge, but for virtue. Forgiveness, then, becomes part of your growth, not theirs. It also means recognizing that people act from their own ignorance, not as an excuse, but as an explanation. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that when people act cruelly, it's because they're mistaken about what's good. They're chasing things they think will bring them happiness, even if it hurts others. That doesn't make it okay, but it helps you understand that their actions are not about your worth. They're about their confusion. Once you see that, your anger softens, not into weakness, but into wisdom. You stop taking everything personally. You start seeing the whole human picture, flawed, scared, trying, just like you. And if you think forgiving means you're letting them win, remember, the real victory is not needing to win. It's being free, free from emotional chains, free from the replay, free to show up in your life without carrying someone else's shadow. Forgiveness is not a one-time event. It's a practice. You may release it today and feel the bitterness return tomorrow. That's okay. You repeat the choice. You return to clarity. You remind yourself, their behavior is not mine to carry. That's discipline. That's freedom. The Stoics also saw forgiveness as part of self-respect. You don't forgive because they deserve it. You forgive because you deserve peace, because dragging their wrongness through your life keeps you tied to them longer than necessary. Forgiveness is how you walk away, not just physically, but mentally. And sometimes, the person you most need to forgive is yourself, for not seeing it sooner, for staying too long, for saying the wrong thing, for reacting in anger. Stoic forgiveness includes self-forgiveness, not through pity, but through responsibility. You see the truth, take ownership, and correct your path. You stop punishing yourself for what you did when you didn't yet know better. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, if you did wrong, correct it. If not, don't torture yourself. That's grace through clarity, and clarity is a form of strength. When you hold yourself to high standards, it's easy to be hard on yourself. But self-forgiveness is not weakness. It's how you reset. It's how you return to your center and try again with more wisdom. And forgiveness has another effect. It opens space. Space to think. Space to act. Space to grow. When your mental and emotional bandwidth isn't tied up in old pain, you're free to invest in the present. You can build, love, lead, without the background noise of betrayal echoing through your choices. This clarity also affects how you relate to others. You become slower to judge, quicker to listen. You no longer assume the worst because you've practiced seeing beyond behavior. You don't tolerate abuse, but you no longer carry every offense like a scar. You move lighter. And it's not because life has gotten easier, it's because you've gotten stronger. You've trained your mind not to collapse into hate. You've trained your heart not to close. You've trained your spirit to stay open, even when it's been tested. That's rare. That's powerful. That's stoic. So next time someone wrongs you, pause. Not to excuse, not to forget, but to ask, what's mine to carry? And if the answer is pain that doesn't belong to you anymore, let it go. Not for them, for you. There's a certain kind of freedom that shows up only after you've let go, of bitterness, of blame, of expectations that never served you. Once forgiveness has cleared space inside you, another question quietly appears. What is truly worth your energy? This is where the deeper layer of Stoicism begins to reveal itself. There is a strength that looks like silence, a discipline that feels like peace. It's not detachment out of coldness or numbness, it's focus born from wisdom. The Stoics called it adiaphora, indifference to externals. Not because they believed in apathy, but because they believed in clarity. Indifference, in its true form, is misunderstood. People think it means not caring, but to the Stoics, indifference is not the absence of care. It's the redirection of care. It's the sharp, honest recognition that not everything deserves your reaction, your stress, or your inner attention. Some things are outside your control, and the moment you stop pretending otherwise is the moment you reclaim your power. This idea sits at the heart of Stoic practice. You are responsible for your choices, your character, and your mind. Everything else, praise, blame, wealth, status, weather, health, other people's opinions, is external. And because they are external, they cannot touch your soul unless you invite them in. That doesn't mean these things have no impact. Of course, they affect our lives, but they don't define who we are. They don't determine whether we live with peace or chaos. Only our response does. When you stop investing emotional energy in things beyond your control, something powerful happens. Your time multiplies, your focus sharpens, your life becomes lighter. You are no longer pulled in every direction by every little thing. Someone criticizes you. It doesn't break your center. A plan falls through. You adjust without falling apart. You lose money, miss an opportunity, get ignored, misunderstood, disliked. These things used to rattle you. Now they pass like weather. They're noticed, but not absorbed. This doesn't happen through force. It happens through training. You learn to separate what you can influence from what you wish you could. That line becomes your compass, and following it over and over creates calm. The reason most people feel exhausted isn't because they're doing too much. It's because they're emotionally tangled in things that don't belong to them, trying to change people, trying to make everyone happy, trying to control outcomes that are not theirs to command. The Stoics offered a release from that madness. Through indifference, they gave us a map back to sanity. But it's not detachment from life. It's deeper engagement with what actually matters. Indifference to externals creates space to care more fully about the internal, about virtue, about wisdom, about growth. When you're no longer chasing likes or approval or comfort, you can finally focus on becoming excellent in character. This kind of indifference also sharpens your sense of priority. You stop saying yes out of guilt. You stop wasting hours trying to please people who will never be satisfied. You stop measuring success by things that can be taken from you. Instead, you start measuring it by who you become in the process. And the results are real. When your time isn't hijacked by drama or distraction, you become more present in what you do, more focused in your work, more grounded in your relationships, because you're not splitting yourself between what matters and what doesn't. You've drawn a line, and you keep it. Indifference also teaches you emotional discipline. When something upsetting happens, you pause. Not because you're numb, but because you've trained yourself to respond, not react. You ask, is this within my control? If not, you let go. If yes, you act with reason. This is not repression. This is power. The truth is, most of our stress comes from resisting what is. We want reality to match our expectations, and when it doesn't, we suffer. Indifference doesn't mean we stop caring about life. It means we stop clinging to the version of life we invented in our heads. You start accepting reality as it is, without bitterness, without denial. That acceptance brings peace. Not because everything is easy, but because you're no longer at war with what you cannot change. And this practice creates incredible strength, not the kind that flexes in front of others, but the kind that holds steady when storms come. The Stoics didn't want you to escape the world. They wanted you to be in it, deeply, honestly, bravely, but without being ruled by it. There's freedom in walking into each day, knowing that your peace is not tied to how people treat you, that your worth is not defined by outcomes, that your mind can stay calm in the middle of noise. It also helps you make better decisions, because when you're not driven by fear or approval, you see more clearly. You stop choosing based on short-term emotion and start choosing based on long-term virtue. Indifference removes the fog. It also protects your energy. When you practice this, you stop over-explaining yourself. You stop chasing arguments that don't lead anywhere. You stop obsessing over how others interpret your life. You begin to live lighter, not because life is lighter, but because your mind has become disciplined. And in that discipline, you discover joy. Not the thrill of validation, but the steady joy of inner freedom. The joy of knowing that your life is yours again, that you've stopped outsourcing your happiness to things you don't control. Indifference to externals is not about cold detachment. It's about warm focus. You still love, care, create, and contribute. But you do it with clear eyes and a steady hand. You don't try to bend the world. You bend yourself toward what matters. And because of that, you suffer less. Not because pain disappears, but because your resistance to pain disappears. You no longer expect the world to be perfect. You expect yourself to be resilient. That mindset changes everything. You start to see setbacks as part of the path. Discomfort becomes a teacher. Loss becomes a lesson. Every challenge becomes fuel for growth. Because your peace no longer depends on smooth conditions, it depends on your own clarity. When you practice indifference, your identity becomes stronger. You don't shift with every opinion. You don't collapse when something ends. You don't inflate when praised or deflate when ignored. You stay rooted. That stability helps others too. When you're calm, they feel safer around you. When you're clear, they find clarity in your presence. You become someone people can lean on, not because you have all the answers, but because you're not tossed around by every wind. This kind of presence can only grow in the soil of indifference to what doesn't matter. And it's not about becoming emotionless, it's about not becoming enslaved by emotion. You still feel, but your feelings don't drive your choices, your values do. And because of that, you trust yourself more, you respect yourself more. That respect leads to peace, the kind that doesn't depend on outcomes, the kind that comes from knowing, I showed up, I acted from principle, I wasn't pulled off course by every external wave. Indifference is not passive, it's active refusal to give power to things that have no real power. It's how you guard your mind, how you protect your values, how you reclaim your time. And the beauty of it is, it's available now. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need anyone's permission. You just need the courage to draw that line. This matters. That doesn't. And then live it. Again and again. Until it becomes your way. Not just an idea, but a habit. That's how the hidden power of indifference becomes your quiet advantage in a noisy world. Once you begin to master the power of indifference, something else begins to shift beneath the surface. You stop reacting to every external force. You stop giving away your time, energy, and peace to things that don't deserve it. You develop focus, discipline, and calm. But then, quietly, a new temptation appears. The urge to become perfect. The desire to live up to some flawless version of yourself, or worse, some imagined ideal of what a philosopher, a Stoic, or a truly virtuous person should be. It's subtle. It sneaks in through admiration, through ambition, through the constant hunger to be better. You study the teachings, you read the quotes, you begin to build an image in your mind of the Stoic sage, the one who never loses control, who never doubts, who never wavers, and slowly, without realizing it, you stop allowing yourself to be human. This is where another kind of wisdom is needed. The Stoics spoke often of the sage, but they never claimed to be one. Not Marcus Aurelius, not Seneca, not Epictetus. They knew the sage was a guidepost, not a destination, a standard to learn from, not a mirror to compare yourself against. The sage was never meant to make you feel small. It was meant to keep you grounded in the pursuit of growth. The danger of worshipping the sage lies in distortion. You begin to judge yourself not by progress, but by distance from perfection. And when that happens, every mistake feels like failure. Every emotion becomes weakness. Every moment of confusion becomes shame. But that's not Stoicism. That's ego in disguise. Stoicism was never about becoming superhuman. It was about becoming more fully human, wise, courageous, balanced, and compassionate within the limits of your own nature. The true practice is not to become the sage. It's to move in that direction, knowing you never arrive, knowing the road is endless, and choosing to walk it anyway. Because the value is not in reaching the end. It's in who you become along the way. Contemplating the sage should inspire humility, not pressure. It should help you ask, how can I respond better next time, instead of, why do I keep messing this up? That shift turns guilt into growth. It turns self-judgment into self-awareness. There's nothing wrong with looking up to someone wiser. It can help you clarify your values. It can remind you what matters. But the moment you start idolizing, you stop learning. You turn a living philosophy into a frozen image. And frozen things don't grow. The Stoics themselves made this distinction. They described the sage in theory, but never expected to meet one in practice. The point wasn't to find the perfect example. It was to reflect on the qualities worth cultivating: patience, honesty, resilience, self-control, each one not as a destination, but as a daily challenge. You can admire a quality without turning it into a cage. You can aim for excellence without crushing yourself when you fall short. Because falling short doesn't mean failure, it means you're doing the work. It means you're paying attention. It means you care enough to notice when you've gone off course. The idea of the sage is there to bring you back, not to punish you, but to remind you what you're capable of. It's not a scoreboard, it's a compass. And the compass doesn't ask you to be perfect. It asks you to keep moving in the right direction. This mindset protects you from one of the most damaging traps: the belief that progress must always be visible, that your practice should look good from the outside. But the most meaningful progress happens quietly. No applause, no perfection, just small, honest efforts repeated over time. When you stop worshipping the sage, you give yourself permission to be honest about where you really are. That honesty is more useful than any image, because from that place you can actually grow. You can see clearly what needs work. You can forgive yourself without making excuses, and you can move forward without dragging shame along for the ride. Perfectionism is not strength. It's a form of fear. It says, if I don't get it right, I'm not enough. Stoicism rejects that. It says, you are enough to begin again, begin better. Every day is a new test. Every moment is a chance to return to your values. And if you ever feel overwhelmed by how far you still have to go, Remember, even Marcus Aurelius had doubts. Even Epictetus spoke with urgency because he knew how easy it was to forget what we've learned. The difference is, they didn't let those struggles stop them. They used them. They practiced in the middle of chaos, not in the absence of it. So you can stop waiting to be perfect before you start showing up with integrity. You can stop punishing yourself for not being the sage. The world doesn't need more statues. It needs more people willing to do the hard, quiet work of growth. That work is messy. It's full of contradictions. Some days you're disciplined. Other days you lose your temper. Some mornings you rise with purpose. Others you forget everything you've learned. But the sage doesn't disappear because of a bad day. The compass still points north, and you're still on the path. There's a deeper peace in letting go of the pressure to always be composed. It allows you to focus on what really matters: how you respond after the fall, how you realign after drifting, how you continue even when you're tired of trying. Growth doesn't require perfection. It requires honesty, effort, and the humility to keep going. You also stop comparing yourself to others who seem more together. Because now you know, the person who appears calm might be full of fear. The one who quotes Stoicism fluently might still panic in silence. What matters is not the performance. What matters is what you build when no one is watching. Contemplating the sage can keep you grounded if you use it correctly. If you reflect on their discipline without expecting to match it. If you draw lessons from their life without turning them into gods. The sage is not an idol. It's a mirror for your best self, your potential. Not a demand, but a direction. And when you stop chasing perfection, you start building consistency. You show up even when it's not dramatic. You return to the practices even when they feel boring. You stay focused even when no one notices. This quiet repetition is what transforms you. Because greatness in Stoicism doesn't come from one flawless moment. It comes from 1,000 small choices. Choices to pause, to speak honestly, to act with restraint, to admit a mistake, to forgive, reflect, and begin again. The sage is not a superhero. The sage is someone who lives with principle, especially when it's hard. Someone who practices what they preach, even when no one's watching. Someone who fails and corrects, who struggles and keeps walking. You're not supposed to worship that. You're supposed to join it. And you do that not by copying every move, but by finding your own version of those values, your own way of living with wisdom, your own rhythm of returning to what matters. That's how philosophy becomes alive, when you make it yours. So keep studying, keep reflecting, keep learning. But don't forget that the real test is in your actions, not in how close you are to the sage, but in how deeply you live your truth. Progress, not perfection. Direction, not destination. This is how you grow without breaking. This is how you pursue virtue without pride. This is how you follow the sage without ever needing to become one. When you stop idolizing perfection and start focusing on steady, honest growth, something else comes into focus. Your body, not as decoration, not as a symbol of worth, but as a tool, a vessel, a temporary, powerful partner in the practice of virtue. After all, what good is wisdom if you're too tired to act on it? What use is clarity if your physical habits drag you down? The Stoics knew that the body matters, but not in the way modern culture obsesses over it. They saw it not as a trophy or a status symbol, but as an instrument for living a good life. Not the goal, but the means. They did not glorify the body, nor did they neglect it. Instead, they maintained it with respect, purpose, and discipline. This is a radical shift from what we're taught today. In much of the modern world, the body has become a project of endless comparison, a billboard of identity, a measurement of social value. But the Stoics rejected vanity. They did not train for admiration. They trained for function, for readiness, for the ability to meet life's demands with strength and balance. Caring for the body was a moral act, not because of how it looked, but because of what it allowed them to do. Wake up early, endure discomfort, speak clearly, resist laziness, serve others, show up fully. The body supported these goals, and so it was given its due attention, but never worshipped. Seneca wrote that a philosopher should care for his body, but not be ruled by it. If it failed, he would adapt. If it was strong, he would use it well. But in neither case did it define who he was. This is a powerful mindset, one that protects you from both obsession and neglect. Discipline, in the Stoic view, is not about extremes. It's about alignment. You eat not to punish or reward yourself, but to sustain clarity. You train not to sculpt an image, but to build endurance for life's weight. You rest not out of laziness, but to be fully present when action is needed. This kind of relationship with the body is rare today. Most people are either disconnected from their bodies, treating them like afterthoughts, or completely consumed by them, chasing ideals that shift with every trend. But Stoicism teaches that health is not a performance. It is preparation. When your body is strong, your mind is sharper. You move through the day with energy. You make decisions faster. You carry yourself with purpose. You feel less reactive, less foggy, less weak. This is not about reaching a perfect state. It's about staying capable. The Stoics understood that you can't control everything that happens to your body. Illness, injury, age, these come whether you like it or not. But what you can control is how you treat it in the time you have. You can train it to be resilient, to recover, to serve, and to resist decay for as long as possible. Marcus Aurelius, even as emperor, reminded himself daily that the body was just flesh, blood, and bone. He didn't attach his worth to it. He used it as a tool. When it hurt, he didn't panic. When it weakened, he adapted. But he didn't ignore it either. He stretched, he worked, he walked. He understood that philosophy doesn't live only in books. It lives in how you carry yourself every day. There's also a deeper lesson here. Caring for your body builds character. It teaches patience. It demands consistency. It asks you to show up even when you don't feel like it. And that kind of discipline spills over into every other part of your life. When you wake up early to move your body, you're not just building muscle, you're building momentum. When you choose to eat with awareness, you're practicing moderation. When you sleep on time, you're choosing wisdom over impulse. These choices reinforce who you are becoming, not just physically, but ethically. But here's the difference. The Stoics didn't glorify discomfort for its own sake. They didn't push for burnout. They valued rest as much as effort. The key was balance. Effort aligned with purpose. Rest aligned with renewal. The body was not a battlefield. It was a discipline. And it wasn't isolated from the mind. The Stoics saw the body and mind as partners. What you do to one affects the other. Physical pain tests your reason. Illness tests your patience. Hunger tests your temper. Fatigue tests your judgment. Training your body is also training your ability to stay grounded under pressure. That's why Stoic practice included physical hardship, not to suffer, but to prepare. Cold showers, long walks, simple diets. These were ways to strengthen both body and will, to make comfort a choice, not a dependency, to become the kind of person who can face discomfort without complaint. In a world of luxury and convenience, that mindset is more powerful than ever. When everyone else seeks ease, you choose readiness. When others avoid discomfort, you train for it. That's not cruelty. It's care, not obsession. It's responsibility. And that responsibility includes knowing your limits. The Stoic doesn't chase exhaustion. They don't tie their worth to performance. They listen to their body with respect. They recover when needed. They don't ignore pain. They observe it. They respond. They adjust. They continue. The purpose of this attention is not vanity. It's virtue. You care for your body because you have work to do in this world, because someone might need you strong, because you've been given one life and one vessel, and stewardship is a form of gratitude. You don't neglect it because that's waste. You don't worship it because that's foolish. You maintain it because it is your tool for action. And when it's well tended, everything else improves. You think clearer, you move faster, you sleep deeper. You resist temptation more easily. Your emotions become steadier. Your resilience sharpens. All of this allows you to live by principle with greater ease. Even your presence changes. When you stand with a strong posture, when your breath is calm, when your movement is intentional, people feel that. It builds trust, not because you're performing, but because you're aligned. The body reflects that alignment, but none of this requires perfection. You don't need to be an athlete. You don't need to chase aesthetics. You simply need to return to the basic question: is my body supporting my purpose? If not, what can I improve? Gently, consistently, honestly. This approach also protects you from falling into extremes. The Stoic doesn't attach pride to suffering. They don't brag about workouts or punish themselves for missed days. They keep going, quietly, with focus, because the goal is not to impress. The goal is to prepare. Your physical habits become part of your ethical life, not separate, not superficial, but essential. You care for the body not to be admired, but to be useful. You rest not to avoid effort, but to restore strength. You train not to dominate others, but to master yourself. And the mastery isn't loud. It doesn't need praise. It doesn't ask to be seen. It's in the way you move, the steadiness of your breath, the calm in your voice. It's in your readiness to help, your ability to endure, your willingness to serve. So if you've neglected the body, start where you are. One walk, one stretch, one honest meal. If you've obsessed over the body, step back. Remember your purpose. Use your energy wisely. Care for the body without making it your identity. That balance is where freedom lives, in discipline without punishment, in care without obsession, in effort guided by principle. This is how the Stoics trained, not to shine, but to serve, not to sculpt an image, but to strengthen a soul. And they used the body not as a trophy, but as a tool, a bridge between intention and action, a quiet ally in the pursuit of virtue. Once you begin treating your body as a tool for purpose rather than a target for praise, you start noticing another pattern. Even when the body is well-fed, well-rested and strong, the mind can still be noisy. The breath may be calm, the posture steady, but inside your head, a storm may still be speaking. And it speaks often, with urgency, with volume, and with distortion. The Stoics taught that much of our suffering does not come from events, but from the story we tell ourselves about those events. That story rarely pauses. It judges everything, It replays conversations. It imagines disasters. It creates arguments that haven't happened and regrets that haven't healed. It calls itself truth, but most of the time, it's fiction. This inner narrator is not your enemy, but it is not your master either. It evolved to protect you, to interpret the world quickly, to assign meaning so you could act. But when it goes unchecked, it becomes a critic, a dramatist, a false prophet of what people think, what might go wrong, and why you are not enough. Stoicism offers an answer, not by trying to erase thoughts, but by helping you see them clearly. To the Stoics, it was not thinking that caused trouble, but unexamined thinking. Thoughts can be tools, or they can be traps. It all depends on whether you question them. The first step is noticing the story, not in the middle of a breakdown, but in the quiet moments where a thought arises. They don't respect me. This always happens. I can't do this. Instead of reacting, you pause. You look at the sentence in your mind like a stranger's voice, and then you ask, is this true, or is this just habit? Most thoughts are habits. They come from past pain, repetition, or fear. They wear the costume of logic, but underneath, they are just noise. Epictetus taught that we are disturbed not by things, but by the view we take of them. That view often arrives as a monologue you didn't ask for, but you still listen. Silencing the inner narrator doesn't mean shutting down thought. It means creating space between thought and identity. It means remembering, not every thought is a fact. Not every feeling is a forecast. Not every story is worth telling again. You do this by observing your thoughts like a Stoic watches a storm, not with panic, but with distance. You say, a thought is passing through. Let me see it without becoming it. That small act turns chaos into awareness, and awareness is where self-command begins. The Stoics used reason as their anchor. When fear spoke, they questioned it. When pride rose, they examined it. When anger burned, they challenged it. They knew the mind could deceive as easily as it could guide. So they treated it like a muscle, one to be trained, not blindly obeyed. This discipline helps you reduce anxiety, not by denying uncertainty, but by stopping the stories that exaggerate it. Your narrator says, "What if this ruins everything?" Stoic thinking replies, "Let's look at what's actually happening." Often, the worst-case scenario is not real. The suffering is in the projection, not the present. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That power begins when you start choosing which thoughts to feed and which ones to release. Feeding a thought means rehearsing it, repeating it, believing it without challenge. Releasing it means seeing it rise and fall like a wave that doesn't need your attention to crash. You are not the wave. You are the ocean underneath. You also start to separate yourself from your inner critic. The narrator often sounds like you, but its tone is judgmental, impatient, harsh. It points out what's missing, what went wrong, what others might be thinking. You can notice this voice and say, "That's not me. That's the untrained part of my mind trying to stay in control." The Stoics weren't immune to inner noise, but they created practices to keep it from taking over. One of those practices is writing. Putting your thoughts on paper breaks their illusion of power. What sounds overwhelming in your head often looks small when written down. Another practice is reframing. When your narrator says, "I failed," the Stoic reframes, "I learned." When it says, "They hurt me," the Stoic reframes, "They acted from ignorance, not evil." When it says, This is the end, the Stoic reframes. This is one part of a much longer story. This reframing isn't denial, it's choice. It's the decision to tell a story that strengthens you, not weakens you. A story grounded in reason, not panic. In clarity, not catastrophe. You also develop the skill of silence, not just externally, but internally. The ability to sit in stillness without filling it with words. This is rare. Most people reach for noise the moment silence arrives. But the Stoics embraced silence as a source of insight. In silence, the narrator loses its script. It begins to slow. And you start to hear something else. Truth beneath thought. Wisdom that does not need language. A knowing that comes from presence, not opinion. This is not a one-time fix. The narrator will keep returning. It will comment on your work, your relationships, your choices. It will try to pull you into old roles. The victim, the hero, the one who never measures up. Each time you get to decide, do I believe this? Do I respond? Or do I return to stillness? You also begin to notice that the narrator loves patterns. It recycles the same fears, the same assumptions, the same doubts. Once you see the pattern, you no longer fear it. You say, this again, and let it pass. That shift from reaction to observation is freedom. In time, you become less interested in mental storytelling. You crave peace more than drama. You value stillness more than self-talk. And when thoughts come, you meet them with curiosity, not judgment. You ask, does this help me live better? If not, you release it. This changes how you speak to yourself. Your inner voice becomes more compassionate, more patient, more honest, not soft, but supportive. You correct without shaming. You reflect without spiraling. You speak to yourself as a friend, not an enemy. And as the inner narrator loses its grip, something else grows in its place. Presence. You start to be where you are, to do what you're doing, fully, without constantly explaining it to yourself. You walk without replaying. You speak without rehearsing. You listen without waiting to respond. Life becomes quieter inside. Not empty, but focused. Not dull, but deep. This is the result of Stoic training. Not a silencing of the mind, but a strengthening of it. So that thought becomes tool, not tyrant. So that the narrator serves you instead of running you. It doesn't mean you never think. It means you think clearly, with choice, with awareness. It means you stop being dragged by your mind and start guiding it. This is how the Stoics lived. Not free from thought, but free from being ruled by it. Not empty, but steady. Not without inner voices, but with the strength to answer them wisely. That strength is available now. In every moment you choose stillness over story, clarity over reaction, awareness over noise. That is the quiet victory. That is how you return to yourself, fully, calmly, and on purpose. When the inner narrator begins to quiet, you start to notice what's been beneath all along, the clarity to see, the space to create. The noise fades, and something steady rises. That stillness becomes fertile ground for deeper work, especially for those whose lives are shaped by expression. For artists, writers, musicians, thinkers, and builders of all kinds, the mind is the tool and the battlefield. And this is where Stoicism meets creativity in the most unexpected and powerful way. Creative people often wrestle with intensity. There's passion, doubt, longing, perfectionism. There's the pull to share something meaningful, paired with the fear of being seen and misunderstood. There's the joy of building and the pain of being judged for what you've built. But Stoicism offers creators a quiet strength that shields without numbing, sharpens without hardening. The Stoic approach doesn't limit creativity, it protects it. It creates the emotional space to keep working without getting stuck in praise or crushed by silence. It brings you back to the core, making something not to be celebrated, but because it must be made. Not for applause, but for alignment. The process becomes the focus. The outcome becomes extra. Detachment from results doesn't mean not caring. It means caring in the right direction. You do your work with full heart, with full effort, but you release your grip on what comes after. You don't chase perfection, you pursue craft. You don't measure the work by numbers, you measure it by truth. This mindset frees creators from the prison of expectations. You stop writing only to go viral. You stop painting for approval. You stop performing to fill a hole. Instead, you return to the reason you started, to give form to something honest, to follow curiosity, to bring clarity where there was once confusion. Stoicism teaches you to control what is yours, the effort, the discipline, the intention, not the market, not the audience, not the reception. Your job is to show up, to refine, to improve, to finish. The rest is wind and weather. When creators lose this perspective, they burn out. They compare constantly. They question their worth based on shifting trends. But when you practice Stoic detachment, you gain resilience. Rejection doesn't destroy you. Success doesn't inflate you. You stay steady, not cold, not distant, but anchored. This allows your work to become deeper. You no longer perform creativity, you embody it. Your art becomes an act of integrity, not insecurity. You write because you need to speak. You sculpt because your hands remember something your words cannot say. And you let the work live without needing it to explain you. The Stoics remind us, you are not your reputation, you are not your applause, you are not your failures or your reviews. You are what you build, how you show up, and whether you stay true to your values when no one is watching. This is especially important when you're in the middle, when you're unknown, unrecognized, uncertain. Stoic philosophy helps you endure that quiet space. It teaches you to love the making, not the outcome, to wake up and do the work, even when no one's asking for it. You stop waiting for permission. You stop waiting for motivation. You work because it is right to work, because the process itself is its own reward. That doesn't mean you avoid growth. On the contrary, you pursue excellence. You seek feedback. You sharpen your skills, but you do it from love of the craft, not fear of being irrelevant. You stop begging your art to make you feel valuable. You bring value to your art by being disciplined. Stoicism also helps with fear. The fear of starting, of being seen, of being criticized. The Stoic doesn't deny fear. They walk with it. They see it, thank it for showing up, and continue anyway. Because fear does not decide. Principle does. You also learn how to endure silence. There will be projects that land with no echo, posts that no one sees, work that no one acknowledges. And in that silence, many creators stop. But the Stoic creator continues, not because they're immune to disappointment, but because they've trained their mind to care more about the work than the reward. There is joy in this, not loud joy, but the deep, satisfying kind. The kind that comes from knowing you gave your best, even if the world never notices. You sleep better, you speak less, you create more. You also become a better collaborator. Stoic practice teaches humility. You let go of the need to be right. You listen. You give feedback without ego. You serve the work, not your status. This kind of posture creates trust. It allows great things to be built together. Stoicism teaches presence. That's everything for a creator. To write the next sentence without comparing it to the last. To play the next note without fearing the reaction. To take the next photo without worrying about whether it will trend. You focus only on what's in front of you. That presence sharpens your senses. You notice more, you feel more, but you don't cling to those feelings. You use them, channel them, translate them into form, and then let them go. When your identity isn't tied to the product, you become free to take risks. You can experiment without fear. You can try something wild, knowing that failure is not fatal. It's information. That's where breakthroughs happen, in the space where results don't define you. Over time, you start to notice something unexpected. Your work improves. Not because you're forcing it, but because you've cleared the internal clutter. There's less self-doubt, less panic, less need. Just attention, just action, just effort. You stop obsessing over originality. You focus on sincerity. You stop comparing your pace to others. You focus on your rhythm. You stop chasing productivity hacks. You focus on depth. And when success does come, if it does, you meet it with perspective. You don't let it own you. You thank it, you learn from it, but you keep going because you were never working for the spotlight. You were working for the craft. That mindset keeps you grounded. When success fades, you're still here. When criticism stings, you stay soft. When doubt returns, you meet it like an old companion, not a threat. This steadiness isn't common, but it is earned. It's earned in the quiet hours, the empty rooms, the work that no one saw but you did anyway. The Stoic creator isn't detached from life. They're immersed in it, but they are not ruled by it. Their creativity flows not from chaos, but from calm. You are allowed to care, deeply, passionately, but you're also allowed to protect your peace, to create with presence, to rest without guilt, to let go without regret. That's the path, not the glamorous one, not the easy one, but the steady, clear, honest one, where what you make becomes a reflection of who you are, not because it's flawless, but because it's real. And when it's real, it resonates, quietly, powerfully, and often, permanently. Not because you demanded it, but because you made it with care and let it go without fear. That's Stoicism for the creator, a philosophy of the soul applied to the work of the hands, where mastery matters more than popularity, where discipline becomes devotion, and where art, freed from ego, becomes truth. When you create from a place of stillness, without clinging to praise or fearing failure, something deeper begins to come undone. The need to be someone. Not in the sense of having purpose or meaning, but in the constant effort to prove your value through titles, roles, and recognition. Even when your art flows freely, the identity machine keeps humming in the background, trying to label you, box you, rank you. Stoicism offers a way to shut it off. The Stoics understood the trap of identity, not the kind rooted in character, but the kind built on performance and attachment. They saw how easy it was to confuse what you do with who you are, to believe that being a leader, an artist, a parent, a student, or a professional somehow defines your worth. That belief creates pressure. It creates fear. It creates confusion when roles shift or titles fade. And it keeps you locked in the exhausting cycle of trying to meet every expectation, keep every appearance, defend every reputation. Stoicism tears through that noise with a clear reminder. Your value is not in what others call you, it's in how you live. Character over identity, integrity over image. Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire of his time, yet he constantly reminded himself that being emperor was just a role he was filling temporarily, a role that did not protect him from weakness, failure, or death. He trained himself to return to what he was, not what he represented, a human being, part of nature, given reason and expected to live by it. This mental shift is vital because roles are unstable. You can be a CEO one day and unemployed the next, a caregiver today, then alone tomorrow. Life changes. The role you attach your value to will not always be yours. So Stoicism teaches detachment, not withdrawal, but perspective. You play the role with full presence, with full effort, but you do not cling to it. You don't forget that underneath the uniform, the position, the compliments, or the criticisms, you are still the same. This protects you from collapse when identity changes. If you lose a job, you don't lose yourself. If a relationship ends, you don't become empty. If status shifts, your foundation holds. Because your worth isn't sitting on top of labels, it's built from character. That character is measured not by what people say about you, but by what you choose when no one is watching. Are you honest? Are you patient? Do you act with courage? Do you lead with reason instead of reaction? These questions matter more than your title, your profile, your image. The world, however, often pulls in the opposite direction. From early on, you are rewarded for wearing the right labels. Smart, talented, successful, attractive, important. The more people recognize these labels, the more you attach to them. But deep down, there's often fear, not of losing the label itself, but of losing the self you tied to it. Unplugging the identity machine means stepping back from all of it, not quitting your job, not erasing your relationships, but learning to see them as roles you perform, not truths you are. A parent is a role, a title is a function. Yourself is the one who navigates all of it with reason and virtue. This perspective gives you power. When others praise you, you don't get drunk on it. When they criticize you, you don't spiral. You see that both are opinions, floating on top of something deeper. Your center is not shaken by their stories. You also become less reactive. When your identity is not under threat, you don't feel the need to defend it. You don't have to win every argument, prove every point, or be seen as right. Your energy shifts from protecting the label to improving the soul. And when you do fail, and you will, it no longer becomes a statement about your identity. It becomes a moment of learning, a reflection point. Failure loses its sting when it doesn't tear down your sense of self. That's the freedom Stoicism trains you for. This freedom also brings more presence. You're not performing your role while secretly wondering how you're being perceived. You're not talking while rehearsing your image. You're just there, listening, thinking, acting from principle. And with this detachment comes humility. The Stoic knows that roles can be stripped away in a moment, that health can falter, that fame fades, that fortune changes. They don't deny these truths. They prepare for them. And in doing so, they stay grateful, grounded, and adaptable. You become more open, less afraid to shift directions, less hesitant to let go of what no longer fits. Because you're no longer confusing changing roles with losing yourself. You can transition, adapt, evolve, without clinging, without collapse. This also changes how you relate to others. You stop putting people in boxes. You stop defining them by what they do, what they have, what they represent. You begin to see their actions more than their titles. And that lets you form deeper, more respectful relationships. It allows you to forgive more easily. Because when someone acts poorly, you don't see them as a permanent identity. You see a person who failed to act by reason. That distinction softens the heart without weakening the boundaries. And it makes room for compassion toward yourself. When you make mistakes, you no longer say, "I am a failure." You say, "I acted poorly. I can do better." That kind of language builds resilience. It doesn't let you off the hook, but it keeps you from falling off the path. You also start giving your energy to things that last. Not status games, not public image, but the internal project of becoming who you respect in quiet. You focus on the kind of mind you carry, not the kind of compliments you collect. This isn't detachment in a cold, distant way. It's warmth without needing reinforcement. It's clarity without dependence. It's the ability to walk into a room without needing it to prove your value. And when you receive recognition, you meet it with gratitude, but not addiction. You don't chase it. You don't bend your principles to protect it. You simply accept it as one signal among many, not a mirror, but a moment. This mindset also helps you live more simply. You stop needing to perform success through consumption. You stop chasing things you don't need just to validate roles you didn't choose. You stop buying identity and start building character. That shift brings peace and focus. You stop spreading yourself thin, trying to be everything to everyone. You begin to ask, what matters to me? Not to the version of me I'm trying to maintain, but to the person I am becoming? That question alone can reset your life. You become less easy to manipulate. When someone tries to flatter your identity, it no longer blinds you. When they try to insult it, it no longer shakes you. You see the game, you step out of it. And that doesn't make you passive. It makes you more powerful, because now your choices aren't reactions, they're responses. You say yes from alignment. You say no from clarity. You move through the world as yourself, not as the version you think others want. The Stoic path doesn't ask you to erase your past or reject your roles. It asks you to use them wisely, to play them with skill, but never to confuse the mask with the soul underneath. Because when you know who you are beyond identity, you stop needing permission. You stop chasing confirmation. You begin to live by something deeper, your reason, your principles, your integrity. That's not withdrawal. That's presence. That's not emptiness. That's alignment. And that's not losing your identity. That's finally finding what's been under it all along. Once you free yourself from the grip of roles and labels, something powerful begins to unfold. You begin to speak and act from who you truly are, not who you're expected to be. Your decisions become cleaner. Your presence becomes lighter. But this new clarity doesn't mean life gets easier. In fact, it reveals something most people avoid: conflict. Not the loud kind always found on the surface, but the subtle moments where your principles are tested, where your patience is stretched, where your values meet opposition. This is where Stoicism reaches one of its most demanding tests: conflict. Not to win arguments, but to reveal your reason. Not to silence others, but to anchor yourself. For the Stoic, conflict isn't a threat to avoid or a game to win. It's a mirror that shows who you are under pressure. Conflict is one of the fastest ways to uncover how strong your reasoning truly is. It's easy to sound wise when everyone agrees with you. It's much harder to stay composed when your beliefs are challenged or when you're spoken to with disrespect. That's when your philosophy is no longer an idea. it's a posture, and either it holds or it doesn't. The Stoics believed that reason, logos, was the guiding force behind a meaningful life. Logos is more than logic, it's harmony. It's the principle that all human beings are connected by rational thought, and that our highest duty is to live in line with it. But the test of this ideal comes not in peace, but in friction. In verbal conflict, the instinct is to defend yourself, to react, to raise your voice, sharpen your tone, strike back. But the Stoic does something different. They pause, they assess, they don't retreat, but they don't escalate either. Their goal is not to defeat, it's to remain grounded in reason and to lead by example. When Marcus Aurelius was surrounded by betrayal, deception, and constant political challenge, he reminded himself not to let the behavior of others drag him from his principles. He wrote that it is possible to remain kind even when others are cruel, to speak clearly even when others shout, to listen carefully even when others accuse. This is not weakness, it is control, it is presence. The ability to stay calm in conflict is not passivity, it's power restrained. It's understanding that your words are tools and using them with precision, not emotion. The Stoic does not fear disagreement. They welcome it as a test of clarity. If someone challenges your belief, you explore it. You ask, is my view well-founded? Am I attached to being right or committed to discovering truth? This mindset turns conflict into dialogue. It creates space for growth, not just defense. Even when someone is clearly wrong, the Stoic sees a deeper opportunity. Epictetus said, "If someone is mistaken, instruct them kindly. If they will not listen, bear with them." That doesn't mean accepting injustice. It means choosing the right method to respond. Anger may feel justified, but it often blocks the very understanding you want to reach. This applies in debates, in conversations with loved ones, in professional disagreements. Every time someone's view opposes yours, the Stoic asks, can I stay steady? Can I respond from principle instead of ego? Can I show strength without creating more harm? One of the most common forms of conflict is being misunderstood. Your actions are misread, your words are twisted, your intent is questioned. The automatic reaction is to explain, defend, or push back. But the Stoic sees something else, a choice. You can speak with calm, or you can remain silent if the moment calls for it. You can stand in the storm of misunderstanding without needing to clear every cloud. The goal is not to let every insult pass. The goal is to respond with proportion. Some things are best addressed directly, others are best left alone. The wise person knows the difference. In ideological conflict, this approach becomes even more important. When your worldview is challenged, the temptation is to double down, to dig into your position and prove its strength. But the Stoic remains open, not because they are uncertain, but because they value truth more than winning. They listen not to reply, but to understand. They respond not with rehearsed points, but with honest thought. Even when disagreeing deeply, the Stoic never forgets that every person shares the same potential for reason. That no matter how different the ideas, the core humanity remains. You never destroy someone's mind to prove your own. This is especially important in an age where disagreement is often seen as threat, where debates turn into battles and respect is replaced by sarcasm. But the Stoic does not lower themselves to the behavior they reject. They remain an example of what it looks like to disagree with dignity. This does not mean always staying quiet. There are times when speaking up is the duty, when injustice must be named, when truth must be defended. But even then, the Stoic asks, am I being moved by anger or guided by reason? Am I trying to teach or simply attack? Will my words serve clarity or only stir emotion? These questions don't weaken your position, they strengthen it, because now your response is chosen, not triggered. It reflects your values, not your pride. That kind of speech cuts through the noise. People hear it differently, because it doesn't come from defense, it comes from depth. Conflict also reveals your control of impulse. You may feel frustration rise, see the edge of your patience, but Stoicism teaches you to wait, to create space between emotion and action. That space is where wisdom lives, where better words form, where harmful ones dissolve. This restraint doesn't mean losing passion, it means applying it wisely. You still care deeply about your message, but you don't let urgency destroy your delivery. You speak with force, but not fury. With truth, but not harm. Even your tone becomes a tool. A calm voice in a heated space often carries more weight than the loudest shout, because it signals that you are not afraid, that you are not here to fight, but to reveal. And that confidence disarms more than aggression ever could. The Stoic also practices letting others have the last word, not because they are defeated, but because they have said what needs to be said. They don't chase resolution, they plant clarity, and they move on. Their peace does not depend on someone else's agreement. This attitude changes everything. Conflict becomes less draining, less personal, less chaotic. You no longer walk away feeling exhausted or ashamed. You walk away knowing you stayed aligned. And when the conflict stays unresolved, the Stoic accepts it, not as failure, but as part of life. Not every disagreement ends in harmony. Not every argument can be fixed, but every one is a chance to hold the line between who you could be and who you choose to be. With time, this practice becomes your nature. You start noticing which fights are worth entering and which are best declined. You stop fearing conflict, but you also stop feeding it. You start speaking more clearly and listening more deeply. You stop needing to dominate. You start choosing to demonstrate. And through it all, you remain centered. Not because you control the other person, but because you control yourself. That's what the Stoics trained for. Not easy lives, not smooth conversations, but the ability to stay calm in the presence of noise, to think when others react, to lead without force, and to hold reason as the highest response to conflict, no matter how loud the world becomes. When you choose reason over reaction in conflict, when you walk away without needing to be right, something else rises to the surface, a quieter discomfort. You've acted with clarity, you've held your ground without aggression, but they still don't see it. They twist your meaning, they call you weak, they speak about you as if they know your intent, and suddenly your peace is threatened not by what was said, but by how you're seen. This is where another kind of test begins, the courage to be misunderstood. There is something uniquely difficult about being judged unfairly. It touches pride, shakes self-image, tempts explanation. You want to clear it up, to make them understand, to correct the story. But Stoicism teaches a different path, not silence out of fear, but restraint from wisdom, not detachment because you don't care, but stillness because you've chosen not to give your peace away. The Stoics called it apatheia, a state not of indifference, but of disciplined calm, a freedom from emotional disturbance when facing things beyond your control. Being misunderstood is one of those things. You cannot control how others see you, You cannot make them understand your heart, your motive, or your reasoning, but you can choose how much of yourself you give to that misunderstanding. Most suffering in this space comes not from the judgment itself, but from the need to fix it. The urge to be seen rightly, the desire to be liked, approved, justified. These are normal impulses, but they create a subtle form of bondage, because now your inner state is tied to someone else's story. The Stoic sees this clearly. They know that peace is not earned through convincing others. It is claimed by remaining whole, even when others are wrong about you. Their silence isn't weakness, it's control. They understand that explaining yourself endlessly often leads not to clarity, but to deeper confusion. You can explain yourself once, you can speak your truth calmly. But when explanation becomes obsession, when your mind begins to beg for correction from others, you've handed over something sacred, your self-trust. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you must be satisfied with your own soul walking its path, even if no one joins you, even if others misunderstand. Because if your conscience is clear and your actions are aligned with reason, then you've done your part. This is not arrogance. It is responsibility. You take full ownership of your thoughts, your choices, your values, and then you release what is not yours to carry: opinions, rumors, reactions. Not because you are above it, but because you are not built to be shaped by every passing voice. This mindset requires courage, because being misunderstood is uncomfortable. It isolates you. It makes you feel unseen, unheard, alone. But the Stoic trains themselves to find strength in that space, to hold steady, to speak when it's useful, and remain silent when it's not. Even among friends, this test appears. You act from principle, and they think you've changed. You choose a quieter life, and they say you're wasting your potential. You walk away from conflict, and they think you're afraid. You speak with kindness, and they think you're naive. In these moments, you must decide, do I explain myself, or do I stay true to the path I've chosen? Often, silence says more. Apatheia doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means you feel deeply, but without losing control. You notice the sting of judgment, and you breathe. You hear the twist of your words, and you stay still. You see the labels being placed on you, and you refuse to wear them. You don't retreat in bitterness. You continue to live well. You let your actions speak over time. And when people are ready to see you clearly, they will, or they won't. Either way, your life is not waiting on their vision. This posture gives you a unique kind of freedom. You are no longer a servant to perception. You no longer live in reaction to every opinion. You walk into a room not needing to perform. You leave a conversation not needing to correct. You write, speak, lead, not because it will be accepted, but because it is right. You also stop over-apologizing. You apologize when you're wrong, not when you're uncomfortable. You stop over-explaining. You let the misunderstanding sit without chasing it. You stop chasing closure. You trust that time, truth, and consistency will reveal what matters most. This doesn't mean becoming cold. You can still care for others. You can still seek harmony when possible, but you stop sacrificing your values for the sake of image. You stop trading your peace for validation. You begin to respect yourself enough to be misunderstood, and with that respect comes humility. You don't assume you're always right. You remain open to feedback, but you don't change your path every time someone disapproves. You weigh the input, you reflect, and then you return to your principles. You also learn how to stay quiet in the middle of noise. When others speak about you in ways that don't reflect your truth, you hold steady. Not because it doesn't matter, but because it's not worth losing your clarity over. You keep your peace, not by fighting for your image, but by standing in your integrity. That's how trust grows, first with yourself. You start to believe in your ability to hold your ground without needing agreement. You start to see that your life is not a public debate, it's a private responsibility. And this changes how you move through the world. You become less performative, less dependent, more free. You dress how you want, speak how you think, walk with quiet purpose, not to stand out, but because you've stopped trying to blend in. Even in leadership, this matters. The courage to be misunderstood allows you to make decisions that others may not grasp right away. You lead not by always being liked, but by doing what is necessary. That kind of clarity inspires more than charm ever could. The Stoic knows that truth often takes time to be seen, that wisdom sometimes looks like rebellion, that virtue can be mistaken for weakness. But none of that changes what is right, so they walk on, not to be provocative, but to remain free. This freedom is rare, but it can be trained. Each time you feel the urge to defend yourself when it's not useful, you breathe. Each time you want to correct someone's opinion, you pause. Each time you're tempted to act out of fear of judgment, you ask, is this aligned with my values, or am I just avoiding discomfort? That small question can change your day. Over time, it changes your life. You begin to speak only when it serves the truth, not your ego. You act with simplicity, not for applause. You stay rooted when misread, because your roots are deep. And when someone finally does understand you, it's not because you begged them to. It's because you lived consistently enough for the truth to become obvious. That's the power of apatheia. That's the courage to be misunderstood. And that's where real freedom begins. Not in being seen perfectly, but in being whole, whether or not you're seen at all. Once you stop trying to be understood by everyone, once you let go of the need for others to validate your thoughts and approve your choices, something unexpected happens. There's a quiet space left behind, an emptiness at first. But slowly, something begins to grow there. Not bitterness, not coldness, but a kind of joy. Not the kind most people talk about, not the smile that comes from comfort or success, but a different kind of joy. One that's earned in difficulty, one that's discovered when nothing is easy. This is the joy the Stoics pointed to, but spoke of carefully. Not the pleasure of good luck or the thrill of fortune. This joy is called kara, a quiet inner gladness, rooted in the strength to stand tall through adversity and stay whole no matter what life removes. Most people think Stoicism is only about surviving hardship, about endurance, about gritting your teeth and bearing pain with a straight face. And yes, the Stoics valued resilience, but they did not stop there. They reached beyond survival. They pointed toward a deeper reward, joy that comes not in spite of the struggle, but because of how you meet it. This joy doesn't look like loud laughter. It doesn't demand a perfect life. It doesn't require external celebration. It's the satisfaction of staying steady in chaos, of knowing you didn't betray your values when it would have been easy. It's the feeling of walking through fire without letting it shape your soul into something smaller. Marcus Aurelius wrote often about difficulty, but he didn't write as a victim. He spoke of the fire inside that turns pain into fuel, that transforms every obstacle into material for virtue. That's where this joy lives, in the decision to use hardship as training, not punishment. Joy in adversity is not denial. It's not pretending things are fine when they're not. It's the deep understanding that you still have something no one can take: your reason, your choices, your response. You find joy not because things are good, but because you are choosing to be good anyway. This mindset doesn't come from comfort. It's built one test at a time. The missed opportunity, the betrayal, the illness, the pressure, the loss. These moments can break you or shape you. The Stoic chooses the second, not because they're stronger than everyone else, but because they've practiced seeing things as they are and choosing their path anyway. There's freedom in that kind of discipline. It's not forced, it's earned. You look around and realize, I am still here. I still have clarity. I still have self-respect. I still have peace that wasn't given to me by the world, so the world can't take it away. This form of joy doesn't need ideal conditions. It thrives in real life. It appears when you choose honesty over comfort, when you walk away from what is easy but wrong, when you accept the hardship and stay open-hearted. It grows stronger when things don't go your way, when you face uncertainty and act with courage anyway, when you carry grief and don't close your heart to life, when you're misunderstood and you continue to live well without resentment. In these moments, there's a lightness, not because life is light, but because your center has stopped depending on life to feel right. The Stoics weren't seeking numbness. They were building joy that couldn't be shaken by bad news. This is why they trained the mind. This is why they practiced reflection. This is why they returned again and again to the same principles, not because they forgot, but because they knew how easily the world pulls us toward bitterness. When you act from virtue under pressure, when you hold fast to your character in discomfort, joy becomes a byproduct. You don't need applause. You don't need everything to make sense. You just know, deep in your core, that you've done what you could with what you had. And that's enough. Even in grief, this joy remains. Not happiness, not comfort, but a kind of quiet faith that you are meeting life honestly, that you are not hiding, that your sorrow is clean, not corrupted by bitterness or denial. There is joy in knowing that you are no longer fragile in the way you once were, that you can face disappointment without collapse, that you can sit with discomfort without needing to escape it, that you can meet failure without losing your self-worth. This joy becomes a strength, a reserve, a resource. When others break down in the face of setbacks, you feel the sting, but you stay upright. When others lose themselves in anger, you feel the pull, but you hold steady. When others retreat in despair, you sit still, breathe, and wait for clarity. Joy in adversity is not a trick of the mind. It's a result of practice. You build it by returning every day to the questions that matter. What's in my control? What's the right action here? What would the best version of me choose now? And then you act, not perfectly but honestly, and with each honest action, the joy grows, slowly, quietly, steadily. It's also contagious. When others see you face difficulty with grace, they don't always understand it, but they feel it. They see that there is another way to live. You teach not by preaching, but by being the example, by showing what it looks like to walk through the fire and remain composed. That kind of presence doesn't need to speak loudly. It speaks by how you carry yourself. This kind of joy doesn't leave when the moment passes. It becomes part of you. It sits beneath your speech, your choices, your relationships. It reminds you that no matter what happens, you have a compass, and that compass is steady. Even when plans fail, this joy stays, because your peace was never tied to the outcome. It was tied to the process. You did your part. You stayed in alignment. That's the win. This is why the Stoics placed so much emphasis on preparation. They didn't wait for hardship to start thinking clearly. They practiced in small moments, holding their tongue, waking up early, walking in the cold, going without something they wanted. Not because they loved suffering, but because they loved freedom. And freedom is not given, it's practiced. You learn to take joy in your own progress, not in comparison, not in perfection, but in the fact that you are becoming harder to shake, easier to trust, more honest, more balanced. You start to admire the version of yourself who chooses well under pressure, and that admiration becomes joy. You also find joy in seeing adversity as the thing that shaped you. Without it, you would not have become as thoughtful, as humble, as steady. You don't thank the pain, but you see the value it brought. You don't seek suffering, but you use it well. The Stoic joy isn't loud, but it's powerful. It walks into storms with calm. It speaks gently when others raise their voices. It forgives without needing repayment. It moves through pain without seeking pity. It's not flashy, but it's unshakable. You reach it not by avoiding life's weight, but by carrying it well. And when the weight grows heavier, so does your strength. This is the quiet reward of Stoic practice. Joy that is not based on comfort or recognition, but on your ability to live well in every condition, not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. That's the joy of adversity. That's the strength that cannot be borrowed or faked. That's the light you carry, even when the world goes dark. When joy is no longer tied to comfort, and when adversity becomes a place where peace can grow, something deeper begins to stir beneath the surface of your choices. You start to wonder why you are able to meet life this way, why some things feel easier to accept, why you begin to feel a calm trust in the order of things, even when the order isn't fully visible. This is where the roots of Stoicism reach beneath the visible, into the metaphysical, into the beliefs that quietly shape the way you move through every day. Stoicism is often praised for its practicality, its clear advice, its psychological insights, its focus on action. But underneath all of it, there is a structure of belief about the nature of the world, about fate, about reason guiding the universe. Whether you believe in God, nature, or simply in patterns of cause and effect, these metaphysical ideas have more impact on your life than you might think. At the heart of Stoic metaphysics is the idea that the universe is rationally ordered, that events do not unfold randomly, but according to a web of cause, reason, and structure. The Stoics called this logos, not just reason within the individual, but reason embedded in all things. And when you start seeing life this way, your choices begin to shift. You no longer act from panic when plans change. You pause and ask, what part of this is beyond me? What is this situation asking of me? If the Stoics were right, and events are not punishments, but expressions of a larger system, then even in chaos, you can respond with direction. This belief doesn't require religion. Even for a secular reader, the idea that cause and effect govern the world creates space for a calmer relationship to uncertainty. You stop seeing hardship as unfair and start recognizing it as part of a natural flow. You still feel the pain, but you stop adding the layer of resistance that makes it worse. Epictetus taught that events themselves are neutral. What we add to them, fear, blame, outrage, is optional. This idea only works if you trust that there's structure behind the events, that there is meaning to the order. You may not always know the reason, but you trust that your task is not to control outcomes. It's to align your response with integrity. Even everyday choices are shaped by this belief. You wake up and choose your actions not based on what brings the fastest reward, but what fits within the role you've been given today. If you believe the role is temporary and assigned by something bigger, fate, nature, time, it changes how you show up. You don't resent the small tasks. You do them with care because you believe they are part of something larger. This outlook builds humility. You stop placing yourself at the center of everything. You see that you are a small but meaningful part of a vast whole. That your job is not to fight the flow, but to cooperate with it. That cooperation doesn't mean passivity, it means clarity. In practical terms, this belief system keeps you from overcorrecting. When something goes wrong, you don't spin out. You step back and say, perhaps this is how it was meant to unfold. What can I learn? What virtue can I practice here? You don't need to know the full design to trust that there is a pattern. The Stoics believed in providence, not as magical thinking, but as confidence in the structure of life. Marcus Aurelius returned again and again to the idea that what comes from nature is good, not easy, not comfortable, but good in the sense that it serves the whole. Even if it brings you discomfort, it may bring balance to something beyond your view. That belief leads to better decisions. You stop acting only from preference. You start acting from principle. You ask not just what you want, but what the moment requires. You see life as a dialogue between your will and the world's design. This doesn't erase your freedom. In fact, it defines it more clearly. You are not free from consequence, from difficulty, from time, but you are free in how you interpret what happens. You are free to act with reason in the face of chance. You are free to hold your values no matter the outcome. This belief in cosmic order also changes how you deal with others. When someone wrongs you, you don't see them as an isolated enemy. You see them as part of the same world you're in, governed by the same flaws, shaped by the same forces. You respond not with cruelty, but with calm. You don't tolerate harm, but you stop taking it as personal betrayal. Even in relationships, this worldview creates space. When someone leaves your life, you may grieve, but you do not cling. You remind yourself that you were given time together, and now the current has shifted. The flow moves on, and your task is to stay aligned with it. This shift in perspective builds trust, not blind hope, but earned trust. A trust that whatever is unfolding, your response matters more than your prediction. That even when you don't see the larger picture, you are still part of it. And your role is not to rewrite it, but to play your part well. That kind of mindset brings peace to decision-making. You start asking different questions. Instead of, how do I win? You ask, what is the right thing here? Instead of, what will they think? You ask, what do I stand for? Instead of, why is this happening to me? You ask, what is this asking from me? Those questions lead to different actions. They simplify your days, they clarify your options, and they remind you that you are not as lost as you think, that you are not without direction, even when things are uncertain. You carry your direction within, even in small moments, choosing how to respond to a delay, deciding what to prioritize in a busy week, handling a conversation that feels tense. These ideas make a difference. They slow you down. They return you to something steadier than your feelings. They remind you that you are not the center of the universe, but you do have a part to play. And because you believe the whole has meaning, your part carries weight. Not because others see it, but because you know it is aligned. This belief structure also prepares you for loss. You stop asking why good things end and start accepting that all things move through cycles. The Stoics practiced reflecting on impermanence, not to be morbid, but to keep perspective. To remember that change is not failure, it's the rule. With that mindset, you begin to greet transitions not with fear, but with respect. You understand that even the best moments must pass, but their passing does not remove their meaning. In fact, their impermanence makes them more valuable. They were never yours to keep. They were yours to witness and act within. And that too shapes your choices. You stop wasting time on things that don't matter. You stop chasing things that fade quickly. You start aligning your days with what lasts: truth, character, presence. You stop asking what others expect from you and start asking what life itself is asking of you. Even in times of doubt, this framework gives you something to return to, a way to think, a way to see, a structure that doesn't depend on belief in a God, but belief in order, in purpose through pattern, in meaning through virtue. You are no longer thrown by every change in the wind, because your sail is not random, it is trimmed with reason. And even when you cannot see where you're going, you trust that how you go there matters most. This is metaphysical Stoicism, not an abstract theory, but a way of seeing that shapes how you live. Quietly, clearly, with dignity, even in uncertainty. And through that dignity, the world begins to feel less hostile. Not because it changes, but because you have changed the way you move through it. From resistance to flow, from reaction to reason, from confusion to calm. And that calm becomes your strength, no matter what direction life takes next. When you begin to trust in the structure of life, when you act not from fear, but from alignment with nature's rhythm, the next question arises quietly. What is nature really teaching you? You begin to sense that this trust you've cultivated isn't just intellectual, it's physical, real, alive. It's not found only in books or in silent reflection, but in the world outside your walls, in the wind, in the sky, in the soil beneath your feet. The Stoics knew this deeply. Their understanding of nature wasn't limited to philosophy, it was lived. They saw nature as the ultimate teacher, not a metaphor, but a model. Marcus Aurelius would write his most grounded reflections not in the center of a city, but during his military campaigns under open skies. He looked to the stars for perspective, to rivers for lessons on flow, to trees for patience, and to storms for resilience. He understood that the natural world doesn't just decorate life, it reveals how to live. Rewilding the Stoic self means reconnecting with nature not as scenery, but as structure. It means allowing the earth to remind you of your place within the whole. It's not about escape, it's about returning to simplicity, to clarity, to what has always been here but is often ignored. Most of modern life pulls you away from this. Artificial light, constant noise, digital schedules. It becomes easier to think of yourself as separate, as a mind floating through machines. But nature has no titles, no notifications, no need for performance. It asks nothing but presence. And in that simplicity, the Stoic finds their roots again. The act of walking through a forest, sitting by a stream, watching the sky shift. These are not luxuries. They are tools, direct lessons in perspective. Because out there, nothing adjusts itself to your moods. The mountain doesn't care how frustrated you are. The rain doesn't stop because you're uncomfortable. The sun doesn't wait for your schedule. Nature offers you the cleanest mirror of all, one that reflects without distortion. This reflection is humbling. You begin to feel your size in the best possible way, not small in weakness, but small in context. You are part of something vast, alive, and continuous. Your problems, which once filled every thought, start to shrink. Not because they disappear, but because you see they are not the center of existence. This shift changes how you handle stress. A day that once felt overwhelming becomes just a passing weather pattern in your life. A hard season is seen like winter. Cold, yes, but part of the cycle. You don't expect endless comfort from the world. You expect change, and you prepare for it like nature does, by adapting, not by resisting. Even a simple walk can reset your state. When your thoughts are tangled, your emotions heavy, stepping into natural surroundings allows your nervous system to slow. The mind follows the body follows the rhythm of the world. There's something deeply grounding in hearing birds instead of machines, in seeing patterns in leaves instead of on screens. The Stoics saw this as necessary practice. Just as they trained the mind through reflection and the body through discipline, they trained the spirit through stillness in nature. The goal was not to become wild in chaos, but wild in wisdom, untamed by ego, rooted in clarity. This approach also teaches patience. Trees grow slowly, streams carve stone over centuries. Nothing in nature hurries, and yet everything is accomplished. You begin to question your urgency. The pressure to produce, to prove, to perform, these start to fade when you realize nothing lasting is rushed. Rewilding also means stripping away what is not essential. When you hike, you only take what you need. You realize how much of your normal life is filled with excess, possessions, obligations, distractions. In the quiet of the woods or the vastness of the desert, you meet yourself again without roles or reputation. You are not your job. You are not your status. You are breath and bone and awareness. In that simplicity, gratitude arises. Not the forced kind, but the kind that flows naturally when you feel the sun warm your skin or smell pine on the air. You remember that joy does not require achievement. It requires presence, and nature makes presence easier. There is also a kind of discipline in wild spaces. Trails are not tailored for comfort. Weather shifts without warning. You learn to move with the elements instead of fighting them. That resilience builds character. You become more flexible, more accepting, more capable of discomfort without complaint. This is how nature becomes a Stoic classroom. It strips you of illusion and replaces it with truth. You stop trying to control every outcome. You start flowing with what comes, not passively, but wisely. You learn to read your inner weather the same way you learn to read the sky. You know when to act and when to wait, when to speak and when to listen. Even the act of solitude becomes different. In cities, solitude often feels like loneliness. In nature, it feels like reconnection. You are alone, but not isolated. Surrounded, but not overwhelmed. You become aware of something deeper than thought, a quiet pulse that reminds you of your belonging in the fabric of things. This kind of solitude is healing. It allows you to sort your thoughts without distraction. It gives space for emotions to rise and settle. It reminds you that presence is not just a concept, it is a practice. The Stoics believed that everything in nature follows its purpose. The bee pollinates, the river flows, the sun rises. Each thing acts in harmony with its nature. This insight is central, because it means your peace depends not on control, but on alignment. You don't have to control the world. You have to live in agreement with it. You have to discover what is yours to do, and do it fully, with grace. When you spend time in nature, you start to see this more clearly. Your preferences soften, your cravings quiet, your thoughts slow. And in that quiet, you hear the questions that matter. Am I living according to reason? Am I using my time well? Am I present with the people I love? Am I aligned with my principles? These are not abstract questions. They shape your days. And nature, in its calm repetition, brings them forward again and again, not with force, but with invitation. Even pain feels different in this setting, not lighter, but clearer. Grief in a forest doesn't feel like collapse. It feels like returning to something ancient, something shared. You begin to see that struggle is part of the story, not the failure of it. This understanding gives you strength when you return to your everyday life. You carry the stillness of the mountain, the flow of the river, the patience of the stars. You don't need to live in the wilderness to benefit from it. A few minutes of stillness under the sky, a short walk without a phone, a weekend spent outside. These practices recalibrate your nervous system, your focus, your values. They make it easier to return to what matters. They remind you that peace is not somewhere else. It's right here, always available when you return to the rhythm that nature has always known. This is rewilding the Stoic self. Not a rejection of reason, but a full embrace of it. Not an escape from the world, but a deeper entry into it. You don't lose yourself out there. You find what was covered by noise. You remember how to breathe, how to move, how to see again. And when you come back, you bring that clarity with you, into your work, into your relationships, into your choices. You are no longer chasing life, you are walking with it. And that is where the deepest kind of strength begins. Quiet, grounded, unshakable. Not because the world has changed, but because you have remembered who you are in it. Returning from the stillness of nature, you carry with you a kind of presence that is hard to explain, but easy to feel. You begin to live more simply, think more clearly, and act with less rush. You've remembered how to be. But even in that grounded state, life remains uncertain. And here, a new challenge begins, one that tests your ability to stay fully present while also preparing for what might go wrong. This is where Stoicism demands something subtle, the balance between anticipation and presence. The Stoics taught the importance of premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity, not to feed fear, but to sharpen the mind. It was a way to imagine what could go wrong, so that when it did, you would not be broken by surprise. You would be ready, not in fear, but in reason. At the same time, they emphasized presence, the value of showing up in the moment, of engaging with what's in front of you, of living now, not endlessly waiting for the next threat. This creates a tension. How do you look ahead without leaving the present behind? How do you anticipate pain without losing the ability to enjoy what is? The answer lies in how you train the mind. The Stoic does not obsess about future problems. They visualize them briefly, clearly, then return to the present stronger. Anticipation is not their home. It's their preparation ground. Presence is where they live. Anticipating hardship allows you to test your attachments. You imagine losing your job, your status, your comforts, not because you want that to happen, but because you want to know who you are without them. This builds resilience. It makes you lighter. If you've already considered loss, you're less likely to panic when it arrives. But if you stay in that mindset too long, you miss what's here. You lose the ability to see beauty, to enjoy connection, to breathe fully. That's not Stoic. That's fear disguised as wisdom. And the Stoics warned against that too. Marcus Aurelius wrote about keeping the mind free of disturbance, of not letting future worries steal the day, because each day each moment is already asking for your attention. You don't need to pick one or the other. You can train for storms while appreciating the calm. You can mentally rehearse challenge, then return to dinner with your family and fully taste the meal. You can prepare for loss while still holding your loved ones with care and gratitude. The strength comes in switching modes deliberately. You take time to reflect. What would I do if this changed, if this was taken, if this became harder? You test your thinking. You adjust expectations. You become clear about what you can truly control. And then you close that door. You step back into the present with lighter shoulders, knowing that you've already trained. You trust yourself to meet life as it comes. This balance sharpens how you handle stress. When something unexpected happens, you've already run the scenario. Not with dread, but with reason. You don't freeze. You act. You adjust. You accept. You stay present, not because you're naive, but because you're ready. It also protects your joy. You stop tying happiness to everything going right. You find meaning even in imperfection. Because you've stopped expecting life to be easy, you're no longer destroyed when it's not. You also stop taking things for granted. When you premeditate the loss of a person, a place, a routine, it doesn't make you cold. It makes you see them more clearly. You notice their presence. You stop sleepwalking through your time with them. This makes your gratitude real, not performative, but grounded in awareness. This mindset changes how you approach goals. You plan carefully, knowing setbacks are likely. You put in effort without clinging to outcome. You give your best, not because it guarantees success, but because it aligns with your principles. And when success comes, you enjoy it fully, because you're there, present, not already worried about what's next. You begin to see that anticipation and presence are not enemies. They are tools used at different moments. One trains the mind, the other opens the heart. One prepares you to act under pressure. The other reminds you to live while you can. When both are used well, they support each other. You anticipate so that you can be more present. You become more present so that when the future arrives, you are ready to meet it with calm. This kind of thinking also guards against denial. You don't pretend everything will be fine. You know things can fall apart. And that knowledge frees you from needing everything to stay perfect. You stop holding life with a tight grip. You let it flow. Not carelessly, but consciously. It makes your decisions sharper. You no longer avoid difficulty, you face it early. You ask the hard questions. What will I do if this fails? Who will I become if this ends? What matters most if I lose this comfort? And once those questions are answered, you're free to enjoy what you have. Because you've already prepared to lose it. Not in a morbid way, in a human way, with humility, with depth. You stop flinching at the word loss. You stop delaying presence until everything feels safe. You stop treating this moment as a stepping stone to the next. You begin to live fully now, not because you're ignoring what could go wrong, but because you've already made peace with the fact that things change. This mindset also builds better relationships. You don't demand people make you feel secure. You find that security inside. You love with openness, knowing that love can hurt. You trust others, knowing trust can be broken. You stay honest, not because it protects you from conflict, but because it protects your character. When things go wrong, you adjust without bitterness. You don't say, "This shouldn't have happened." You say, "I expected this might happen, and I can face it." This gives you a sense of emotional independence. You feel fear, but it doesn't rule you. You notice anxiety, but you don't obey it. You experience joy, but you don't cling to it. You are present with life, but not owned by it. You also stop procrastinating on the things that matter. You know time is fragile. You know comfort isn't guaranteed. You know the present moment is the only one you truly have. So you begin the project. You speak the truth. You take the walk. You say what needs to be said, because you've anticipated that you may not always have the chance. And that's not tragedy. That's clarity. This harmony between anticipation and presence makes you steady. You are not frozen by fear, nor scattered by impulse. You are thoughtful in your planning and open in your living. You look ahead without leaving now behind. This is the Stoic rhythm. To visit the future in thought, but live in the present with strength. To expect hardship and still choose joy. To carry readiness in your mind and still carry peace in your heart. To train without tension. To live without illusion. To be prepared and to be here, fully, always, without regret. When you stop living in fear of what's next and begin showing up fully to what's now, your life starts to feel clearer. Your actions become more intentional. Your words become more honest. But even as you cultivate this presence and practice anticipation with discipline, you may notice something else. Growth often needs a mirror. You begin to sense the value of guidance, not someone to command you, but someone who embodies the very steadiness you're trying to build. This is where the idea of the Stoic mentor enters, not as a figure of control, but as a quiet example of how to live with reason, courage, and consistency. The Stoic mentor is not defined by age, status, or position. What defines them is alignment. Their life reflects their values. Their presence teaches without instruction. They do not impose their path onto others. Instead, they reveal what is possible through how they carry themselves. Their wisdom doesn't shout. It doesn't demand agreement. It lives in the way they handle stress, how they speak during conflict, how they show up when no one is watching. A true Stoic mentor doesn't seek followers. They focus on mastering themselves, and in doing so, they naturally influence others. Their guidance comes from integrity, not ego. They don't give answers. They help you find your own. They know that real teaching isn't about control. It's about awakening discipline within someone else. In a world full of noise, this kind of presence is rare. Many people seek to be seen as leaders, but few are willing to live in a way that quietly earns trust. The Stoic mentor never uses their role to dominate. They resist the urge to fix others. They offer a kind of steady support that allows space for mistakes, questions, and reflection. This form of mentorship is more powerful than advice. Advice is easy to give. It's safe. But example is risky. It requires consistency. It holds you accountable even when no one is asking. The Stoic mentor takes that responsibility seriously, not because they want to impress, but because they understand that teaching through action creates deeper change than any words ever could. Finding this kind of mentor starts with paying attention, not to popularity, but to behavior. Who handles frustration with grace? Who stays calm under pressure? Who lives simply, speaks clearly, and keeps their commitments? These people may not call themselves mentors. They may not even know they are teaching. But if their presence challenges you to live better, then they already are. Often the best Stoic mentors don't try to inspire. They simply live in alignment, and that alignment becomes magnetic. You learn by watching. You grow by observing how they move through difficulty, how they own their failures, how they treat people when there's nothing to gain. You absorb their discipline not by being told what to do, but by seeing how it's done. This also means you don't need to wait for the perfect mentor to appear. You can learn from fragments, from moments, from strangers. One sentence, one choice, one posture can change your thinking. The Stoic mind doesn't idolize teachers. It learns from anything that models virtue. That could be a historical figure, a quiet colleague, a difficult parent who still shows up every day, or even a child who reminds you what presence looks like. Mentorship in Stoicism is not hierarchical, it's relational. You don't follow a mentor in blind agreement. You walk alongside their example. You reflect it in your own way. You stay committed to your own development while honoring the influence that helped clarify your path. Eventually, the question shifts. It's no longer just about finding a Stoic mentor. It becomes about becoming one, not through performance, but through practice. You become a mentor not when you are perfect, but when you begin to live in a way that is worth learning from. When your behavior matches your values consistently, even when it's hard. This means embracing responsibility without needing recognition. It means holding yourself to a standard, not because anyone is watching, but because your life has become your message. You don't teach through quotes. You teach through how you handle failure, through how you forgive, through how you hold boundaries without aggression, through how you stay kind without being weak. A modern Stoic mentor might be a parent who doesn't react in anger, but teaches through quiet patience, a leader who makes decisions based on principle, not popularity, a friend who listens fully and speaks with care. These roles don't require a platform. They require presence, the willingness to show up again and again with clarity and humility. And just like the mentors you admire, you don't need to announce that you're leading. You don't need to label yourself as an example. In fact, the most powerful mentors rarely do. They let their actions build trust over time. They understand that people are not changed by instruction alone. They are changed when they witness someone living the very thing they've been struggling to apply. You don't have to be finished growing to guide someone else. You just have to be honest about your progress. You admit what you're still learning. You don't pretend. That honesty builds respect. Because mentorship isn't about knowing everything. It's about walking the path and pointing to what's real. This kind of mentorship is needed now more than ever. In a world full of quick fixes, shallow advice, and empty performance, people are hungry for quiet steadiness. For someone who shows them that strength doesn't have to be loud, that virtue is not outdated, that discipline still matters. Being a Stoic mentor doesn't require dramatic change. It begins in small, repeated moments. Choosing patience when you could choose anger. Choosing humility when pride is easier. Choosing presence when distraction tempts you. These moments may feel invisible, but they build something permanent. And when people notice, you don't take credit. You don't become a symbol. You become a reminder, a living example that it is still possible to live by principle in a messy, fast world, that a calm voice still carries weight, that consistency is still powerful, that integrity still inspires, not through force, but through reflection. You begin to notice that others around you are affected, not because you tell them what to do, but because your steadiness gives them permission to be steady too. Your calm helps others slow down. Your focus reminds others what matters. Your way of living becomes a quiet challenge for others to raise their own standards. This is the true impact of the Stoic mentor archetype. It's not about legacy or leadership roles. It's about influence without demand. It's about reminding people of their own potential. by fully committing to your own. And that's the work. Not just to learn Stoicism, but to live it so deeply, so honestly, that others begin to ask, not what you believe, but how you became this way. And when they do, your answer won't be a lecture. It will be your life. When you start living in a way that others quietly learn from, when your choices reflect values instead of image, a new demand begins to rise. People notice your steadiness, your clarity, your calm, and they want your time, your energy, your agreement. Some come with respect, others with expectation. As your presence grows, so does the pressure. And here, the next Stoic lesson appears. Learning how to say no, not out of rejection, but from discipline. Not with anger, but with clarity. The ability to say no is a practice in freedom. It's not about pushing people away. It's about holding space for the life you are building. The Stoics understood that without boundaries, even the wisest person becomes scattered. Without clear limits, your time becomes owned by the urgent instead of the important. You begin to serve noise instead of purpose. Saying no is a form of ethical action. It is not an emotional reaction. It is not a wall built in frustration. It is a thoughtful decision to protect your priorities, your peace, and your focus. And it is best done with strength that is quiet, not defensive, not apologetic, but rooted in reason. The Stoic doesn't say no from ego. They say it from alignment. They ask, is this request in line with my values? Will this action move me closer to virtue or farther from it? Does this serve what I've chosen to cultivate, or does it distract me from it? When the answer is no, they act without delay. They speak without drama. There is no performance, just a boundary, clear, honest, and firm. This is difficult in a world where people expect agreement. Many are taught to feel guilty for refusing, to believe that politeness means saying yes. But the Stoic mindset reverses this. Saying yes when you mean no is not kindness, it's confusion, it's the beginning of resentment, it's the quiet destruction of focus. Seneca warned against scattering the self. He said that those who give away their time thoughtlessly are worse than those who waste money, because time, unlike money, can never be replaced. Every yes you give must come from conviction, not fear of judgment. And every no you speak must be based on self-respect, not avoidance. This practice starts small. You begin by noticing where your time goes, who fills your calendar, what conversations drain you, what tasks you say yes to just to avoid discomfort. These small leaks are signs that you haven't fully claimed your own life. Stoic boundary setting doesn't involve blame. It involves responsibility. You are not required to explain your no, but when you do choose to speak, you speak directly. Not emotionally, not with regret, just with clarity. This is not aligned with what I've committed to. That's enough. There will be people who don't like it, who misinterpret your no as rejection. But the Stoic prepares for that. You do not control their response, you control your intention. You hold the line without cruelty, but also without apology, because you know what you're protecting, your attention, your virtue, your time. This discipline creates strength, not the kind that looks powerful, but the kind that feels grounded. You begin to trust yourself more, because now your life is shaped by intention, not obligation. You start to move through the day with purpose, not reaction. And your yes becomes more powerful, because it's no longer automatic. It carries weight. It means something. When you say yes now, it's because you've chosen it, not because you're avoiding conflict or chasing approval or trying to be liked. The Stoic also knows that saying no to others often means saying yes to your deeper responsibilities, yes to rest, yes to thought, yes to creating, reflecting, focusing. These are not luxuries. They are necessary to live with virtue. Without them, your actions become scattered, your energy thins, your clarity fades. The practice of refusal is also a test of emotional maturity. It shows whether you can disappoint others without turning on yourself, whether you can walk away from what's expected without losing your sense of worth, whether you can tolerate being misunderstood without bending to fix it. There is dignity in limits. There is order in refusal. A person who cannot say no will eventually lose the ability to say yes with full heart. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to act according to nature, his nature. And to do that, he had to resist being pulled into other people's dramas, needs, and narratives. He didn't isolate himself, but he didn't become a servant to approval either. Saying no with wisdom also means knowing your purpose. If your values are vague, boundaries are harder to set. But when you are clear on what matters, clarity, virtue, focus, then it becomes easier to spot what threatens those things. And once seen, you act, not with aggression, with direction. Even in leadership, this discipline matters. A Stoic leader doesn't overextend to prove themselves. They make decisions that serve the whole, not their image. They decline what is outside the mission. They protect their team's energy as fiercely as their own. Their refusal is never personal, it's strategic. This same clarity can be used in personal relationships. Saying no to habits that pull you into resentment. No to conversations that drain without purpose. No to old dynamics that keep you stuck. Each refusal is a return to your path. Each no clear space for a better yes. And you begin to feel lighter. Because now you're no longer carrying the weight of every request, every demand, every obligation that doesn't belong to you. You've created a shape for your life, and you're honoring its outline. You become a better communicator, because people trust those who set boundaries without hostility. They trust those who mean what they say. Your no doesn't shut doors, it builds trust. It shows that your words have weight. This practice also protects your inner state. When you say no from clarity, you avoid the emotional cost of overextension. You prevent burnout before it starts. You remove the need to justify or defend. You act simply, directly, peacefully. Over time, saying no becomes less about protection and more about design. You begin to shape your days around what aligns with your principles. Your time reflects your values. Your actions follow your purpose. There's still discomfort. There will be times when you hesitate, when guilt whispers, when others push back. But you'll learn to see that discomfort not as a warning, but as a sign you're on the edge of growth. The Stoic doesn't seek to please everyone. They seek to live rightly, and sometimes that means disappointing others, not out of disrespect, but out of honesty. That honesty begins with the self. Before you can say no to others, you must stop saying yes to things that harm your own peace. You must stop betraying your time for approval. Stop sacrificing your values for temporary ease. And then, from that clarity, you speak. You set your boundary. You move forward. Not with guilt, but with calm, with purpose. Because saying no is not rejection. It is protection. It is alignment. It is freedom. Once you learn to say no with calm clarity, not from guilt but from purpose, something important begins to shift. You find yourself stepping back from the constant demands that once consumed your time. You're no longer driven by urgency, flattery, or pressure. You begin choosing with greater care. But then a new question rises, one that reshapes how you see progress altogether. What do you call success now? If your schedule is no longer packed with obligations that don't matter, if your life is no longer a performance for others, how do you know whether it's working? What are you measuring? What counts as progress? This is where Stoicism demands an honest shift, from fortune to character, from external results to internal development, from achievements you can show to values you can live. Most people are trained to define success by outcomes, the job title, the money, the praise, the reputation. If things go well, they say they're doing well. If things fall apart, they say they've failed. But this approach leaves your self-worth at the mercy of things you don't control. The Stoics saw this as a fundamental error. They taught that real success, true fulfillment, comes not from getting what you want, but from becoming who you're meant to be. The measure isn't what you gain, it's how you live, not whether you won, but whether you lived with audit, excellence of soul. Audit is not a goal you reach once. It's a quality you embody daily. It means striving to live with wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. It means becoming someone who acts with reason even when emotions are high, who chooses integrity even when it costs something, who treats others with fairness even when no one's watching. This redefinition of what's working doesn't erase ambition, it refines it. You still set goals, work hard, aim high, but you don't make your peace depend on results. You don't tie your value to success or your identity to failure. You keep your focus on how you show up, how you carry yourself, how you respond when things go wrong. That's the test of character, not when everything is smooth, but when pressure comes, when uncertainty rises, when setbacks multiply. In those moments you ask, am I living in alignment with what matters? If the answer is yes, then you're already succeeding, no matter what the scoreboard says. This mindset transforms how you handle comparison. You stop measuring your life against what others have. You stop chasing someone else's definition of winning. You begin to see that real success is invisible. It lives in discipline, in quiet effort, in how you treat people, in whether you sleep with a clear conscience. Audit gives your days meaning that can't be taken. It's the kind of strength that survives disappointment, the kind of peace that doesn't vanish when plans fall through, the kind of fulfillment that grows even in failure because you've done what you believe is right. And that rightness isn't rigid, it's thoughtful. Audit includes humility. It allows you to change direction without losing yourself. It allows you to admit mistakes, not because you're broken, but because you're committed to growing. You stop chasing perfection and start seeking excellence, not in outcome, but in presence. You care more about being honest than being admired. You prioritize clarity over control. You put your energy into building character, not because it makes life easier, but because it makes life real. This doesn't mean you stop aiming high, but your ambition becomes internal. You start asking harder questions. Am I becoming more patient? Am I less reactive than I was a year ago? Do I speak more truthfully? Do I act with more courage? Do I live in alignment even when no one's looking? These questions matter more than likes, promotions, or titles, because they're the ones that shape the quality of your life, not the image of it. You begin to redefine what progress looks like. It might be choosing silence over argument. It might be walking away from temptation. It might be apologizing without excuse. It might be staying present in a moment you used to rush through. These don't make headlines, but they build a life you can respect. This change also frees you from the emotional roller coaster of success and failure. You learn to welcome praise without needing it, to face setbacks without collapsing, to move forward without chasing approval, because your sense of direction comes from within. Arete becomes your compass, not because you're better than others, but because you've stopped borrowing your self-worth from what happens around you. You've built it slowly, honestly, from who you choose to be every day. This way of living creates space for real joy. Not the kind that depends on achievements, but the kind that comes from living clearly, from walking through your life with intention, from knowing that even if you lose everything, you haven't lost yourself. It also changes how you relate to others. You stop needing to compete. You stop needing to prove. You begin to lift others without fear of falling behind, because you've left the race of appearances. You're measuring something else now, something deeper, quieter, and far more lasting. Even your failures begin to serve a different purpose. They're not signs of defeat. They're mirrors. You reflect on them. You learn. You adjust. You continue. Not because you're chasing redemption, but because the pursuit itself is part of excellence. Over time, you stop needing life to look a certain way. You stop asking if it's impressive. You ask if it's meaningful, if it reflects your values, if it helps you grow in the direction of what you most believe in. And when you find yourself off course, as you inevitably will, you don't spiral. You return. You correct. You refocus on what matters, not what you've gained, but what you've become. This shift requires courage, because it's tempting to define success the way everyone else does, to want to be seen, to chase recognition. But the Stoic chooses something harder and better. They choose truth. They choose consistency. They choose inner strength over outer status. That choice builds a life you don't have to escape from. A life that feels solid even when the world shakes. A life measured not by noise, but by integrity. Not by applause, but by presence. Not by how much you control, but by how deeply you live. Because in the end, what matters most isn't what you've accumulated. It's who you are when everything is taken away. And if in that moment you still have character, you have everything. When you begin to measure your life not by fortune but by character, not by noise but by inner clarity, the pursuit itself becomes lighter. You let go of the endless pressure to impress. You stop performing for recognition. You start living for truth. But with that seriousness can come a shadow, an unintended heaviness. You can become so focused on discipline that you forget something essential: how to laugh. And here, the next layer of Stoic practice unfolds: the wisdom of humor. Not every Stoic was somber. In fact, some of the wisest among them were known for their sharp wit and quiet laughter. They did not see humor as weakness or as distraction, but as a tool, a way to soften rigidity, a way to speak truth without pride, a way to keep perspective when things got hard. Humor, when used wisely, keeps the soul from becoming too stiff to bend. Epictetus, perhaps the most quoted Stoic teacher, often used irony to teach. He didn't flatter. He didn't preach with dry detachment. He asked questions, made observations, exposed contradictions, not with cruelty, but with a knowing smile. His humor wasn't aimed to belittle. It was aimed to wake people up. It was a mirror, tilted just enough to help someone see their own absurdity. This kind of humor comes from depth. It's not sarcasm born of bitterness. It's not cruelty masked as cleverness. It's rooted in clarity. When you've stopped taking yourself too seriously, when you've accepted your place in a world far bigger than you, laughter becomes a natural response to life's unpredictable turns. Musonius Rufus, another important Stoic, also knew that a well-placed joke could open the mind faster than a lecture. He didn't use humor to escape responsibility, but to ease tension in those learning how to live rightly. When someone is already struggling with their ego, adding shame doesn't help. But helping them laugh at themselves with compassion without harm can be the first step toward growth. The Stoic view of humor is not one of avoidance. They didn't use jokes to run from truth. They used it to deliver truth more gently. They knew that life is full of contradiction and difficulty, and that those who cannot smile through it become brittle. They understood that wisdom without warmth becomes cold, and that laughter, when guided by reason, becomes a balm. This approach to humor requires intention. It's easy to slip into mockery. It's easy to tear others down to lift yourself up. But Stoic humor is never about superiority. It's not about being the smartest voice in the room. It's about helping yourself and others see more clearly without causing injury in the process. You begin practicing this by starting with yourself. Learning to laugh at your own ego, at your own overreactions, at your moments of contradiction. When you misspeak, when you stumble, when you forget your own advice, those are not failures. They're part of being human. And when you meet those moments with a smirk instead of shame, you disarm the pride that could turn into defensiveness. This doesn't make you careless. It makes you resilient, because humor is not denial, it's distance. The ability to zoom out just enough to recognize that not every moment is as big as it feels, that even when things go wrong, you still have room to breathe, that sometimes the most reasonable response to life's absurdity is to laugh and then continue with intention. You also begin to use humor to soften relationships. A well-timed, kind-spirited joke can dissolve tension faster than hours of serious debate. It shows humility. It shows presence. It shows that you are engaged without being emotionally flooded, and it makes space for others to meet you in that same calm. But Stoic humor is not about performance. You're not trying to be the funniest in the room. You're using humor as a tool, not as a shield. Not to hide emotion, but to reveal it in manageable pieces. Not to avoid seriousness, but to carry it with less friction. This kind of humor also protects against arrogance. It keeps you from believing your own press. It keeps you grounded when others start praising you. Because once you learn to laugh at yourself, flattery loses its grip. You remember how absurd it is to be overly impressed with titles or appearances, and in that remembering, you stay free. Humor also builds connection. When used without sharpness, it becomes a bridge. It says, "We're in this together." It says, "Yes, life is heavy sometimes, but we don't have to carry it with clenched fists." It lets others exhale. It turns distance into common ground. Even in teaching, humor matters. The Stoic mentor, the parent, the leader, the friend, who can offer guidance with a smile instead of a frown, is often more trusted. Because they are not performing authority, they are living reason with humanity. This kind of humor must be trained. It starts with awareness. You notice when the room gets heavy, when you're taking yourself too seriously, when the people around you are tightening up. And in those moments, you don't force a joke, but you allow lightness to enter. A raised eyebrow, a well-placed line, a quiet comment that cuts through tension without cutting anyone else. Humor without cynicism means you laugh with, not at. You never use another person's pain for amusement. You never use your intelligence to humiliate. Your wit becomes an extension of your wisdom, not a substitute for it. Even in solitude, humor matters. When life disappoints you, when plans fall apart, when your progress feels slow, it helps to smile at the absurdity, to say, "Of course this happened," to sit back, take a breath, and laugh, not because it's funny, but because you've stopped expecting the world to arrange itself around your preferences. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop controlling. And when you let go of control, you make space for lightness. You no longer collapse under life's surprises. You meet them with a grin, a steady hand, and the question, "What can I learn from this now?" That's the Stoic laugh. Not loud, not careless, but sharp and kind. The one that rises when you realize how often you've tried to control the uncontrollable. The one that lifts when you see how small your ego looks in the face of nature, time, and death. And it changes how you move through the world. You stop demanding seriousness from every moment. You stop acting like wisdom must be severe. You begin to see that humor is not the enemy of virtue. It's one of its strongest allies. Because only someone who has faced life's storms and stayed calm can afford to laugh honestly. That's the paradox. The more serious your practice becomes, the more space opens for humor, not as escape, but as expression, not as avoidance, but as relief, not as distraction, but as a sign of balance. This is what the Stoics knew, that life is too short to carry in anger, too precious to drown in pride, too unpredictable to navigate with rigidity. So they smiled, not because life was easy, but because they had learned how to stay free. The ability to laugh with grace, to stay light even while life weighs heavy, is a sign of inner balance. Humor, when grounded in wisdom, keeps you soft in a world that often demands hard edges. But even laughter, even lightness, is not immune to drift. It too needs direction. And the more earnestly you try to live by your principles, the more you realize how easy it is to slip away from them without noticing. You can be kind for weeks and then lose your patience in a single hour. You can speak wisely in one moment and react carelessly the next. This is why the Stoics practiced something deeper than daily reflection. They engaged in regular, deliberate audits of the soul. They didn't just want to feel virtuous, they wanted to know whether they were truly living it. They didn't trust moods or impressions, they wanted evidence, they wanted clarity. And that required stepping back and reviewing their lives like an honest accountant, checking each part of the ledger, not with guilt, but with rigor, not with harshness, but with full honesty. This is the Stoic audit, a practice that keeps you close to your principles, not in theory, but in habit. A monthly review of your thoughts, your words, your actions, and your values, not to criticize yourself, but to correct your course before the drift becomes too wide. It's like tending a garden. If you wait too long, the weeds take over. But if you check in often, the soil stays strong. Seneca wrote about examining each day, asking himself where he had succeeded, where he had failed, and where he had simply wasted effort. Epictetus encouraged his students to journal honestly, not to impress, but to become aware. Marcus Aurelius kept meditations not for publication, but for practice. Each of them understood that reflection is not about the past, it's about shaping the future. The monthly audit gives you distance. It's enough time to see patterns, but close enough to still remember what choices you made and why. You're not just reviewing what happened, you're reviewing who you were while it happened. Were you reactive? Were you reasonable? Did you stand up for what mattered? Did you avoid what was difficult? This is not about perfection. It's about alignment. You check your thoughts. Have they become clouded with assumptions, with envy, with complaint? Have you been telling yourself stories that feed fear or pride? Have you been honest with yourself? You check your words. Have you spoken carelessly? Have you exaggerated? Avoided truth to stay comfortable? Used words to hurt when silence would have been wiser? Or have you said what needed to be said with clarity and calm? You check your actions. Did you do what you said you would? Did you hold your boundaries? Did you follow through on discipline? Were your choices guided by reason or by impulse? And finally, you check your values. Are the things you say you care about reflected in your behavior? Do your priorities match your schedule? Are you becoming the kind of person you want to be, or are you chasing something that pulls you away from that center? This audit is not a ritual for self-loathing. It's a tool for strength. You are not here to judge yourself as good or bad. You are here to understand. You are here to sharpen. You are here to realign. The process can be simple. Start by creating space. At the end of each month, take an hour alone. No distractions, no performance, just you and your thoughts. Ask the hard questions. Write the answers down. Be honest about what's been difficult, what's felt off, what you've avoided. Then name your corrections. Not vague goals, but specific adjustments. If you've been scattered, plan a simpler routine. If you've been impatient, choose one interaction next month where you'll slow down. If you've been quiet when you should have spoken, pick one place where your voice will be clear. The goal is not a massive overhaul. It's small, steady course correction. It's noticing where you've drifted from your values and gently, firmly returning to them. This process builds self-trust, because now you're not depending on willpower alone. You're watching your own life with care. You're holding yourself accountable, not with fear, but with focus. Over time, this practice reveals something powerful. You stop being surprised by your own reactions. You start to see them forming before they erupt. You begin to live with more awareness in the moment, because you know you'll be reviewing that moment soon. You become less careless, not because you're trying to be perfect, but because you're committed to growth. And the audit isn't only about correcting what's wrong, it's also about noticing what's right. What virtues have grown stronger? What actions brought you peace? What moments of restraint or kindness or clarity deserve to be remembered? You're not just looking for mistakes. You're strengthening your memory of what excellence looks like, so it's easier to choose again. This also gives you a deeper sense of control. When life feels overwhelming, the audit reminds you that you're not powerless. You always have a say in how you live. You may not choose the weather, but you choose how you walk through the storm. You may not control what others do, but you control what you allow, what you accept, what you reinforce. The audit also deepens your humility, because every time you think you've mastered something, life will show you where you've still got work to do. And that's not failure. That's the path. You begin to expect these challenges, not as setbacks, but as signs that your training is still active. This process helps with relationships too. When you review your behavior regularly, you start to see patterns. The way you respond to criticism, the way you avoid certain conversations, the tone you use when stressed. Once you see these clearly, you can change them, not all at once, but one moment at a time. And you don't need to share your audit with anyone. This is your space for honesty, your private classroom, but its effects will be visible. People will feel your steadiness. They will sense your clarity, not because you announced your progress, but because your presence speaks for itself. Over time, the audit becomes something you look forward to. Not because it's easy, but because it keeps you close to the kind of life you've chosen. It reminds you that virtue is not just a philosophy, it's a daily discipline. And each month, you come back to it with a little more awareness, a little more strength, a little more peace. This is the Stoic audit. Not a punishment, but a practice. Not an emotional breakdown, but a moral check-in. It's how you stay awake, how you keep walking straight even when the road twists, how you live, not just by habit, but by reason, and how, 1 month at a time, you quietly become the person you've always said you wanted to be. When you regularly review your life with honesty, when you face your thoughts and actions like a careful steward of your own character, you begin to notice something subtle and constant beneath it all, the background hum of uncertainty. It never disappears. No matter how clear your plans, how sharp your habits, how well you reflect, the truth remains. The future is never fixed. Control is always partial. Certainty is always limited. And how you respond to that truth becomes one of the most important disciplines of all. For the Stoics, especially Marcus Aurelius, learning to live with uncertainty was not a side practice. It was the practice. He governed an empire under siege. He made decisions that shaped millions of lives. He wrote his reflections at night, knowing he might not survive the next day. His days were filled with military losses, betrayals, political tension, and illness. And yet, his writings are marked not by panic, but by poise. He didn't pretend to know everything. He didn't wait for perfect clarity before acting. He learned to move forward with composure, to hold the tension between action and humility. He knew that the fog would not always lift, and that this was no excuse to freeze. He chose to lead anyway. Uncertainty, for the Stoic, is not a problem to solve. It is a condition of life to understand. Trying to eliminate it only increases anxiety. Accepting it, however, allows the mind to settle. The goal is not to predict every outcome. The goal is to prepare yourself to face any outcome calmly, rationally, and with integrity. Marcus knew he could not see all sides of a problem. He relied on reason, consultation, and principle, not perfect information. He accepted that mistakes would be made, that outcomes would surprise him, that he would be misunderstood or judged. And yet he did not withdraw. He remained present, engaged, responsive. He ruled not from fear of what might happen, but from commitment to what he believed was right. You don't need to rule an empire to experience this same pressure. You face it every day, in your work, in your relationships, in your future. The project without a guaranteed outcome, the conversation you know you need to have even though you don't know how it will land, the decision you must make with only partial information. These are the modern equivalents of standing in the storm with no clear forecast. And how you move through that uncertainty determines not only your peace, but your effectiveness. When you try to wait until everything is safe and clear, you delay the most important actions. When you try to predict every variable, you waste your energy on the impossible. But when you accept the unknown and focus on how you show up inside of it, you begin to move with quiet strength. Tolerating uncertainty is not passive. It's active stillness. It's restraint without paralysis. It's the ability to say, I don't know what tomorrow brings, but I know what kind of person I intend to be when it comes. That intention gives you ground, even when the future does not. You do this by separating what is uncertain from what is essential. The outcome of your effort is not in your control. The effort itself is. The reaction of others is not yours to manage. Your tone and clarity are. The weather may shift. Your response to the weather is a choice. Marcus reminded himself constantly that nature does not guarantee comfort. It guarantees change. And our task is not to demand stability, but to meet change with character. Every moment of uncertainty becomes a mirror for what you really believe. Not what you say, but how you live. This mindset changes how you make decisions. You stop looking for perfect answers. You start identifying the best action available with the information you have. You learn to trust your judgment, not because it's flawless, but because it's been built on discipline, study, and clarity. You stop spinning in anxiety loops. You stop trying to control the uncontrollable. Instead, you focus on preparation. You build systems that can adjust. You practice the flexibility that allows you to bend but not break. You leave space for events to surprise you without letting them define you. And when uncertainty strikes, when a plan collapses or a path closes, you don't collapse with it. You pause. You breathe. You remind yourself, this too is part of the path. You don't waste time asking why it happened. You ask how you will respond. That question brings you back to agency. This habit also helps you support others. When people around you are panicking, your steadiness becomes their anchor. Not because you have all the answers, but because you're not afraid to admit you don't. You're grounded in presence, not prediction. That presence also keeps your emotions in check. You feel the fear, the frustration, the confusion, but you don't act from them. You let them rise and fall without obeying them. You return to reason as your guide, even when feelings cloud the moment. And this is what separates the reactive from the wise. Uncertainty is not just about crisis. It lives in the small, everyday moments too. The silent doubts, the risks you consider, the questions you carry. Stoicism teaches you to hold those moments with openness. You don't need to force clarity. You sit with ambiguity without losing your values. And sometimes you will act, and the result will still be failure. That's part of the deal. But the Stoic doesn't measure life by outcome alone. They measure it by whether they acted with clarity, whether they stayed true, whether they maintained their integrity even when things fell apart. You begin to develop what Marcus had: composure without guarantees, steadiness without certainty, faith not in a specific result, but in your ability to respond well to whatever comes. That is power. That is resilience. And it doesn't require public strength. You can practice this in silence, in how you respond to a late email, a change in plans, a delay in progress. You learn to stop bracing against life. You start walking with it, even when the ground feels shaky. Eventually, you realize that the more you train this mindset, the more calm you carry into every unknown, not because life has become less uncertain, but because you've become more stable. You've stopped needing answers in advance. You've stopped making peace depend on outcomes. You've started choosing how to show up again and again, even when the map is unclear. This is what Marcus did. He ruled a world filled with conflict, failure, and doubt. He didn't rule with perfect knowledge. He ruled with principles, with humility, with readiness. He didn't need to know what would happen tomorrow. He focused on how to act today. And that's the challenge Stoicism extends to each of us. Don't fear uncertainty. Train to meet it with poise. Live without guarantees. Decide without panic. Lead yourself and others through the fog, not by lighting up the whole future, but by walking clearly in the next step. One moment at a time, one choice at a time, without losing yourself. You've just spent 3 hours traveling through the inner architecture of Stoicism, not as theory, but as living practice. From guarding your mornings with intention to rewilding your sense of self in nature. From learning to laugh with purpose to saying no without guilt. You've seen how Marcus Aurelius led with clarity in chaos, how Seneca turned time into gold, how Epictetus taught through sharp, calm wisdom. Together, we've gone beyond endurance into quiet joy, beyond self-improvement into ethical refinement. You've learned to shift from chasing fortune to shaping character, from reacting to reflecting, from appearing good to being good. But this doesn't end here. The question now is not what you've heard, but what you'll practice. Will you keep a monthly moral audit? Will you train your mind to tolerate uncertainty or to stay rooted in values when misunderstood? Will you walk your next steps with more intention, more stillness, more courage? Now, we'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below. What was the one Stoic idea that hit hardest for you? Was it about detachment, presence, or perhaps learning to lead without control? Share your favorite insight and how you might use it starting tomorrow. If you found value here, if this spoke to a part of you that's tired of noise and ready for stillness, subscribe. We go deep, not wide. We speak to the part of you that's ready to grow, not perform. Until next time, live by reason, act with virtue, and hold your peace close, because that's where true strength lives.